Award shows are a fairly modern concept. The idea that a piece of mass media can be viewed identically by millions of people worldwide, with the exception of a few holy scriptures, is mostly a 20th century phenomenon. The need to show who is best, however, is just a part of what it means to be human. Therefore, there is a sort of spectrum of awards adjacent competitions. The most famous example would likely be the Olympic Games, where the top aristocrats of the Greek city-states recognized as being civilized would engage in athletic competitions every 4 years and the winner would be awarded a laurel wreath. But these were not your modern swimming, track, and gymnastics. No, the events were far stranger. Some of them were vaguely terrifying, such as one event called Pancration, where the only banned moves were biting and eye gouging. It was essentially ancient MMA but performed completely in the nude. Yeah, that was also part of the ancient Olympics. Almost all events were performed completely en natural. But the Olympic Games were only one of the 4 rotating Panhellenic Games of classical Greece, and all 3 of the others, which if you must know were called the Pythian, Nemean, and Isthmian Games, included acting competitions for tragedy and drama as well as awards for poetry and other artistic pursuits. While the winners of these competitions were largely unrecorded, this is in many ways closer to the Academy Awards than anything that would occur in the intervening 2 millennia. The first modern-style award show happened in the mid-1800s and was not an acting competition. In fact, the competitors weren't even human. It was the 1859 Newcastle upon Tyne Dog Show, which was held largely as a side event to the more important poultry fair and therefore featured hunting dogs with the prizes on offer, for the winner of each category receiving hunting shotguns manufactured by one of the show's sponsors. But the first true award show, and indeed the one that in many ways defines the category to this day, would be the Academy Awards. It was first held in 1929, where the original winner of Best Picture is a topic of contention, but my favorite part of this ceremony was the winner for Best Title Writing won by Joseph Farnham for No Specific Film over Gerald Duffy for The Private Life of Helen of Troy and George Marion Jr. for No Specific Film. A few more fun Oscar facts. The only actors to be nominated for multiple awards for playing the same character are Bing Crosby for some of the musicals where he happened to be playing the same guy, Peter O'Toole as King Henry II for Becket and A Lion in Winter, Al Pacino for Michael Corleone in The Godfather 1 and 2, Paul Newman as Fast Eddie Felson in The Hustler and The Color of Money, Cate Blanchett as Queen Elizabeth I in Elizabeth and Elizabeth the Golden Age, and Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa in the original Rocky and Creed. Welcome to the first annual Golden Turtle Awards. I'm your host, Joseph Garvey, and I'm going to be taking you through a more comprehensive look at film this year, breaking it down to each of its separate parts. Now, we all know giving awards to art is a silly endeavor. Giving it a ranking in the first place is something I don't like to do, but something that I appreciated growing up as a film fan watching the Oscars is that each category taught me something about how film is constructed and to be more observant about what I'm watching. It's a time of year where recognition is granted to smaller aspects of the filming process, and it's something that I feel like has made me a more educated film fan. So, instead of simply releasing a list of my favorite films of the year, I figured I'd do the industry more justice by breaking down how I felt exactly about each of the top films. It'll give me a chance to learn more about aspects of film I don't know a lot about, and hopefully through the end of this celebration we can come out as better movie scholars. Please, if you're an expert on any of the categories I'm going to be discussing this year, let me know in the comments why I'm so freakishly wrong. Seriously, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Of course, if you're not an expert, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. These kind of lists are a good way of seeing what kind of tastes are out there. But yeah, I'm really excited about this project, and I hope it turns out alright. The categories I'll be going over this year are Lead Actress, Lead Actor, Supporting Actress, Supporting Actor, Production Design, Editing, Makeup, Costume, Cinematography, Sound, Music, Animated Feature, Choreography, Blocking, Lighting, Visual Effects, Writing, Directing, and of course, Best Picture. 19 categories, which I'll be posting one of each day until the Oscars on Sunday, March 2nd. Some categories I've added to the ceremony, like choreography for action or dance. Others I've taken away, whether it's from my complete lack of expertise, the difference between sound mixing and sound editing, or whether I think the category is stupid, like Best Song. I'll be happy to add more next year if need be. Like I said, I'm not an expert at any of these categories, so audience feedback is very much appreciated. This will be the first major project on this channel, so I just want to take this time to thank the small audience that I have. It really means the world to me that anyone would like or comment or watch me talk about movies. I love every second of it, and I don't think I can express in words how much it means to me, but I think you can understand. I'm not fully secure in my picks this year, to be fully honest with you guys. I spent the first half of the year in Korea, so I haven't gotten to see nearly as many films as I usually do. I think it's still a damn good list though. So I'll look forward to seeing you mañana with the first category, Best Supporting Actor. Before the ceremony begins, though, I just want to reiterate the films I haven't seen so that, you know, it's not something that I'm just blowing my nose at. It's just films that I haven't seen at the time of me writing this production. So just to get it all out there, the films I haven't seen are Kinds of Kindness, Nickel Boys, Horizon, An American Saga Part 1, Maxine, The Seed of the Sacred Fig, Thelma, Sing Sing, The Order, Longlegs, The Last Showgirl, Civil War, Oh Canada, Juror Number 2, Drive Away Dolls, The First Omen, Kneecap, Cotto Lake, and It's What's Inside. Listing them all out makes me feel quite bad about myself. But again, I wasn't in the country the first half of the year, so give me some slack. But just as a little side note, this is actually one of the last films I'm recording for this production, so I have seen a lot of these films that I just listed, but didn't have time to write them all out, so a lot of them will show up in the Best Picture video at the end of this whole thing. The only film I saw in the middle of writing this series is I Saw the TV Glow, so it received a lot of nominations toward the back half of the series, but during the front half I just didn't have time to put it all together. But yeah, I just want to reiterate how excited I am to bring this series to anyone who wants to watch it. It took a lot of effort for me. Special shout out to me being unemployed recently. There's no way this series could have happened without that. It's a real honor to put something like this together. It took a lot of effort, a lot of strain, a lot of late nights, and I'm immensely proud of it. And there are quite a few problems with the videos that are coming out. Some things that I just didn't have time to get to because of the nature of what I was doing here. Trying to drop a video every day is very difficult. So if there's one thing I want you guys to do, it's to not be patient with me. I'm an adult, you're adults, I am able to handle criticisms that you guys hand out. It's surprisingly easy for me to handle it, so if you guys have any issues with the technical presentation of the videos or something I'm saying, or you want to argue a certain point with me, I would really love it if you did that in the comments and let me know how to make these videos better, because really at the end of the day, I'm just trying to put my best foot forward. But before we head out, I want to give a special shout out to Ewan Hopper, who wrote the historical segment for this video. He did a great job, and he's always been a person I can lean on for advice or anything I want to go to. As well as Tommy Wangman or Tommy Darko, who helped me put the music together. We banged the music out for the show in about 3 or 4 hours, and he was so talented that he was able to make me sound good, which is a feat in its own right. But he's seriously wonderful, and I'll leave his Spotify in the description below. If anyone's interested also, I'm going to be leaving the music for this show on my own Spotify EP, so I'll leave that in the description. If you're not tired of it by the end of this series, I don't know what's wrong with you. I'm so tired of this music, but maybe if you like it, that's something. I don't know. And so that is going to do it for me. Again, I appreciate you guys watching this, whether you're on a walk or on the computer or on your phone about to go to bed or hanging upside down like a bat. That's how I really want to talk to you, hanging upside down like a bat. I don't have a real drink, but I don't know how to end this video, so I'm going to take this fake drink and I'm going to cheers it to you guys. So cheers to you, and please watch more movies. Welcome back to the Golden Turtle Awards. I'm your host with the most, the friend with a pen, the meet with a greet, the hose with a pose, the dapper who doesn't take a napper, the rock with a nasty block, the pain without the gain, the painter without a frame. Joseph Garvey. For this episode, we're going to be talking about the best supporting actors in film all the way through 2024, with a list so long that it's my longest list. There's going to be a lot of people on here. These supporting categories are going to be great because they have a chance of highlighting more than one performance per film, and award season politics don't have to have me choose between one or the other. I will be picking a winner though at the end of my explanations, which will be receiving the very much coveted Golden Turtle Award. Not many people have the honor of receiving an award like one of these. It's a very high distinction that I'm sure if someone knew they received it, they would squeal like a pig. Like I already alluded to previously, I won't be artificially narrowing down anyone on this list, or any of the lists during this award season. I will be nominating exactly who had a severe impact on me during the year. It could be as low as 3, it could be as high as 20. It just depends on how I'm feeling in any given year. I'll also be rating a performance between leading and supporting in the same way that the Oscars does, which is to say it has absolutely nothing to do with screen time. That being said, let's get on to the nominees. They'll be displayed in alphabetical order according to their last name. Joe Alwyn, The Brutalist. Taylor Swift's ex-boyfriend may soon be known as someone more than Taylor Swift's ex-boyfriend because his performance in The Brutalist was just remarkable. Not only was he tonally in perfect sync with the rest of the film, but he had a bitterness to him that struck me every time I saw him on the screen. He was able to balance being a threatening presence with a childlike insecurity, and I wouldn't be surprised if he came from wealth in real life because he nailed the child-given everything. He was despicable, like watching teeth grind into each other. In a good way. Yura Borisov, Honora. I mean, talk about a performance that just comes out of nowhere. What an incredible job this guy did with the role that he had. Borisov was incredibly likable. His comedic timing was impeccable, he never overdid it, and his straight face was utilized as a weapon. His chemistry with Mikey Madison was fantastic, something that's a credit to both actors. His ability to be genuine, though, is my favorite part of this performance. When it comes to his more dramatic stuff by the end of the film, I felt the real power of what his performance was building to. Austin Butler, Dune, Part 2. What a freak this guy is. Just an absolute freak. A freaky freak. If you've ever seen Austin Butler in interviews, you'll end up thinking to yourself, who the hell is this guy? But I'll tell you what, I love freaks. There's nothing better than a freak, and Denis Villeneuve understood that about him perfectly. This man completely elevated the character he portrayed in the book and made him rich with aura and personality. I couldn't take my eyes off him. He's probably my favorite performance in the whole movie, and this movie is filled with incredible performances. I'll never forget the line that Timothée Chalamet goes. He goes, "May thy knife chip and shatter." And then Austin Butler, "May thy knife chip and shatter." Kieran Culkin, A Real Pain. Look, there's a reason why this guy's the Oscar frontrunner this year. Kieran Culkin gave one of the most authentic performances of the year, and while it wasn't a transformative change or anything like that, it tapped into such a beautiful and human philosophy. Culkin's such a charismatic artist with a rawness to him that disarmed me. He played a character that I'll think about for a long, long time, and a lot of that has to do with his approach to the role. Julian Dennison, Y2K. I've been a huge fan of Julian Dennison ever since his performance in Hunt for the Wilder People, where I think he gave one of the great comedic performances of all time. I wouldn't say he's quite as good here because it's impossible to be, but his timing and personality are still as hot as they ever were. His confidence and silliness add so much to this project, and I'll be damned if he doesn't deserve a nomination. Harris Dickinson, Baby Girl. This is one of the best performances I've seen all year, and it's a character that's so complicated it's impossible to scrape him out of my brain. Dickinson was sexy, naive, confident, off-putting, all-knowing, mysterious, in-your-face. He had so much to balance on his shoulders, and his ability to do all of these things at the same time made him a magic act that you just have to see to believe. He's an archetype of a quote-unquote normal character that feels so much larger than life. I can see why Nicole Kidman was so obsessed with him. Mark Edelstein, Honora. The other supporting performance in Honora is just as interesting, even though these two characters couldn't be anything remotely close to the same. Edelstein has such a goofy charisma, a lovable stupidity that I couldn't stop watching. He was able to tap into a very Gen Z kind of spoiled, like a naturalistic brain rot that tickled me. His charisma just oozed off the screen, and like many characters in the Sean Baker movie, he completely took me by surprise. Mike Faced, Challengers. I love talking about challengers, and I will find any and every opportunity to do so. Feist is great at every age of this story. He's one of those actors that can just squeeze into anything. I just looked it up, and he's 33 years old. That is so much older than I thought. And good for him. He can probably play 20 until he's 40. Also, this is gonna sound weird, but I love the tone of his voice. I just like that, nasally kind of tone. Eduardo Franco, Y2K. Franco is a revelation. I will shout it from the mountaintops. He may not have had the most dramatically surgical performance, but I'll tell you that nobody gave me a better laugh per joke ratio this year than he did. He's just fucking funny, and I think that comedy in general deserves better recognition than what it gets. We're not gonna get funny movies if we don't recognize performances that make us laugh. I get that it's hard to recognize comedy though, because comedians are probably the most likely to recognize how stupid awards are. Chris Hemsworth, Furiosa. He's batshit insane, finally the true Australian we always wanted him to be. His flair was easily the best part of this film, and the energy he brought was such a breath of fresh air compared to the Marvel crap we've seen from him over the past couple of years. Boyd Holbrook, a complete unknown. Out of all the performances here, this is probably the one with the least amount of screen time. I love the way that Holbrook approached the role here. He never shouted or did anything over the top. He was silly, but he had an emptiness that pierced me. The way he talked to Dylan as if they both understood the hell of fame is something I'll take with me for a while. John Earl Jelks, exhibiting forgiveness. John Earl Jelks, on the other hand, had plenty of dramatic stuff to work with, which he nailed in just about every scene he was in. It's difficult to find sympathy for a man like his character, but the way he was able to balance his condolence with his unlikability made it an intriguing performance. He held a lot of weight while he was talking. It was impossible to take my eyes off the guy. Josh O'Connor, Challengers. One of the best feelings I have as a film fan is watching a star manifest themselves in real time. Someone I've never heard of before this role becomes a household name in my head by the end of the year. I mean, this guy was magnetic. He was playful, intelligent, he had so much charm that I would watch him talk to a light post for an hour and a half. Even though he plays a bit of a rat bastard in the movie, the tendency he has towards gentleness makes him an emotionally intelligent rat bastard. Adam Pearson, a different man. What a jovial performance here. Adam Pearson was just about the perfect person you could have for this role. He was so genuine, so charismatic. His enduring attitude made Sebastian Stan's frustration so hilarious. I mean, really, he played a great straight man, and his ability to stay the course made it so that the whole film stuck together. It relied so much on his affable personality, and Pearson was just oozing with magnetism. Guy Pearce, the Brutalist. I think this is by far, bar none, the greatest performance of Guy Pearce's career. I always knew him as an interesting guy who picks good projects from time to time, but if I were being completely honest, I've always seen him as a guy with a low ceiling. His intensity that he approached in the role here is beyond anything I thought he was capable of, and he attacked this role like a lion hunting a wounded calf. He was at times funny, egotistical, megalomaniacal, seething with anger. I bow down to you, Guy Pearce. Bill Skarsgård, Nosferatu. It's a talking point everyone knows, but it's important to mention again that Bill Skarsgård was completely unrecognizable in this role. His ability to modulate his voice made as Count Orlok a villain that will remain in the pantheon of greats, and the way he falls into this role with complete camouflage is incredible. He was creepy, he was weird, he was freaky down there. Stellan Skarsgård, Dune Part 2. My favorite performance in Dune Part 1 is still one of my favorites in Dune Part 2. I think Stellan Skarsgård knows exactly how to approach the role of Baron Harkonnen. He understands the greed and the gluttony. He's such an intimidating force. Top 5 people I wouldn't want to be in a room alone with. Jeremy Strong, The Apprentice. I'll tell you, ever since I started watching Succession, Jeremy Strong has been one of my favorite actors to watch. He plays such a snake in this role, such a cutthroat, business-like attitude. I love how casually Strong plays him, like casually evil. This guy's like the epitome of evil in this world. But as he grows older, the way his character reflects on the work he's done makes him so complex and interesting. He somehow makes you feel bad for this guy, like in a way you can't fault a psychopath because they weren't born with emotions. They never experienced the joy of feeling real love. All of these performers are just delicious. But there can only be one winner. A winner who has proven themselves to be excellent, magnetic, thoughtful, and audacious. Which one of these gentlemen possess that fine quality? Well, for me, it would have to be... Harris Dickinson, Baby Girl. He was a terrific force and completely held his own against some of the greatest actors to ever live. A mysterious man with a mysterious plan. Well, I'll tell you, I'm planning to watch whatever he's got down the road next. Congratulations, Harris Dickinson. You are the first official winner of the Golden Turtle Awards. Special shout out to Kieran Culkin. Like I said, this is an incredibly difficult award to give out, and he was just as deserving. He's a frontrunner for a reason. Just a special, special performance. I'll give him the Silver Turtle. So, what did you think was the best supporting performance of the year? Do you like that this show is going on? Please tell me either way. I could use some help and some stability in life, or some friends. So, if either of those fit whatever you're trying to give out right now, send those vibes in my direction. Animation is cinema. Animation is not a genre. And animation is ready to be taken to the next step. We are all ready for it. Those are the words of someone much smarter than me, Guillermo del Toro. Animation has been a medium that for many years has been relegated to kids' flicks, at least here in the United States, but it's a medium with so much boundless potential and such a high ceiling for success. I love animation because it's a true amalgamation between film and visual art. It has the capabilities of reaching surrealism at a level far greater than that of a live-action picture. Its only limit is your imagination, and that's just not something you can say about every facet of art. I've only seen a few movies this year that are worthy of a nomination, but the top of these films are far better than anything you would see in a different given year in animation. I have high hopes for this medium in the future, and I really believe that it has a chance of breaching through considering the way my generation approaches the medium. With that being said, here are the nominees, given to you in alphabetical order, of course. Flow, produced by Jin Sibilotis, Matisse Kaiser, Ron Giants, Gregory Zalkman. Flow is an ingenious integration of such a small-feeling story into such an epic film. Its characters are beautifully realized, with distinct personalities that keep you engaged throughout. Its writing is great at looking at the complexity of life and the finality of death at your doorstep. It's wonderfully animated and beautifully shot. Not to mention all of the characters are animals. Animals that think like animals. Animals that talk like animals. It doesn't feel like a decision designed for children, it feels like a decision rooted in showing the world in its natural element. I could not possibly recommend this movie enough if I tried. Look Back, produced by Kazuto Matsumura. This is a film that changed the way I look at Tatsuki Fujimoto, the author of Chainsaw Man, because it's such a genuine story that's not covered in sarcasm or meta-analysis. It's an emotionally raw story, and clearly a personal one that you can tell was handled with expert care. The animation is breathtaking, taking advantage of pastel-like brightness and dreamy tones. What a lovely expression of love and obsession, of getting lost in your work and finding it difficult to get back out again. It's also a tight story, a quick hour, and I love that runtime. Piece by Piece, produced by a lot of people. Look, it's a Pharrell documentary made with Legos. How could I not nominate this thing? It was whimsical and offered a new look at the documentary medium that I felt kept me engaged and described situations in a new light. The animation gave the whole story a psychedelic twist, and it allowed the filmmakers to use their imaginations to give the most exciting visual interpretation of the material that they could. It might have had a slightly basic story structure, but because it was Lego, it must be nominated. The Wild Robot, produced by Dean DeBlois, Jeff Herman, and Heather Lanza. This is probably the best movie DreamWorks has ever released, or at least the greatest movie since How to Train Your Dragon was released in 2010. It was a meditative adaptation of Parenthood with wonderful characters and a beautiful atmosphere. It proves that movies for kids are able to be emotionally complicated, well-crafted with a good story, just like any other film. I thought the relationship between the family was incredibly well done, and the animation was drop-your-jaw caliber. It was still a relatively simple interpretation, but as far as kids' movies go, this is everything I could have asked for. These four are an exciting bunch of movies, but the unfortunate reality is that there can only be one winner. I wouldn't say this year was filled to the brim with wonderful animation, but I would say at the very top, this is one of the most impressive years of recent memory. The winner this year is a truly great film, an epic story that pushes past the medium, and is one of the best stories I've ever seen in a theater. The winner is... Flow. Flow's a movie that you'll be seeing a lot more as we break down different elements of film. It's a technical masterpiece and a great testament to the power of independent animation production. Through my review of Flow, I've had the pleasure of meeting and talking with a lot of people that are from Latvia, the original country in which this film is from. And what an exciting film to be the pride of a nation. I mean, this film is deserving of about every award that it gets. Special shout out to Look Back, though, as well. In so many other years, this would have been a lock. You just happened to run into a buzzsaw, and for that, I'm sorry. I'll give it the Silver Turtle. Lighting is one of those exciting categories where they aren't appreciated by any of the major awards bodies, but they are crucial to a film's success, and any director that doesn't choose to harness its power is refusing to create a classic. There is no classic film without great lighting. It doesn't exist. It's also in many ways a forgotten art because before we could digitally alter a shot to make it so the lighting is there, we had to rely on great production crews during day or night shoots. Production crews in general must have been stronger because they were more necessary, it seems like. Luckily, there's been a bit of a swing back in the 2020s towards better lighting, serious production value, and physical sets. It's vitally important, and whenever I see it done well, it gives me pleasure. Deep down in my stomach. Now, I know in some ways this award will be partially a color correction award as well, and I know that these are two completely different categories, but at the moment I have neither the time nor the professional ability to differentiate the two properly, so I'm hoping that's something that I'm going to be able to tackle next year. That's on me, not being a better critic. I hope to have that changed in the future, but for now I'll have to settle for the knowledge that I have, and I will hopefully learn more as I continue this process. That being said, the nominees are A Complete Unknown. While I have some issues with the film, the lighting is certainly not one of them. It had a great soft hue to it that kept the picture feeling homey and contextualized the story well. It was wonderful at utilizing natural light, especially through windows, and it made apartments look like canvases. I was especially pleased and jealous by their ability to capture dim atmospheres. Everybody looked perfect in folksy nightclubs, and the yellow was very mellow. Conclave. This is another film that I had issues with in some areas, but the director was very clear with what they wanted from a technical standpoint. The colors popped, especially at the church they were congregated in, and the lighting had a way of showing the immense beauty of where they were huddled. Each setting felt like its own piece of art, and yet the lighting was able to make the whole thing cohesive. I'm a big fan of what they did here. Dune, Part 2. This is one specifically where I think the lighting and color correction begin to merge. I sometimes find that Denis has an uninteresting color palette. His films can be far too desaturated, causing the rest of the film's visuals to suffer. The first Dune movie was a prime example of that to me. I'll get to that more later, but Dune Part 2 was better than Part 1 in just about every conceivable way, and in this case it has everything to do with finally letting the color hounds loose. The sand popped so hard, the orange absolutely striking the viewer. The desert scenes were wonderfully well realized, and the way he was able to use natural sunlight brought the large production down to earth. It was the black and white scenes as well that struck me. Any good photographer will tell you that that kind of switch leads to a heightened focus on the technicals, because there's no color to fall back on. Exhibiting Forgiveness. Exhibiting Forgiveness is such an underrated film this year, especially given its visual prowess. The film was created by Titus Kaphar, a brilliant photographer in his own right, so extending his abilities to film, it's natural for lighting to be a strong suit of his. What captured me most here was his ability to utilize lighting in a modern design. It can be difficult to capture a house like those in the movie because it has such a cold architectural design, but Kaphar was able to accentuate its properties in a way that felt subtle and yet seriously good. Flow. Yes, animated films contain lighting, and they can contain good lighting too. This film had lighting so good it was metaphorical, the sun being a beacon for the animals to go towards. I almost never fuck with lens flares, but for some reason this film was able to make them work for me. I think it has to do with it staying in the character's perspective, like it contextualized the shock that comes from these events taking place. The sun can blind you and surprise you. La Chimera. Bro, this film goes so hard. It uses natural lighting to display the Italian countryside in a way that feels nostalgic and lovely and existential and childlike. It doesn't hurt either that the locations they're shooting in are breathtaking. I love Italia, and I hope to visit there someday. Look Back. Another great example of an animated film that uses lighting to their advantage. It's striking here and all-encompassing in the way a lot of modern anime films do it. The only thing is that here, this film does it better. Look Back does a very good job of having lighting that's in your face, but not too much that it becomes a distraction. It's just enough that you can believe it would happen in real life, and so not crossing that line allows you to suspend your disbelief and appreciate more what you see on screen. Maria. I have some issues from the perspective of this film. I think it's probably the worst of Pablo Larraín's aristocratic woman biopics. I can't deny, though, that it's an intriguing visual experience. What gets me is the pure amount of lights that they use to light. So much light. Light everywhere. The outdoor scenes are also experimental and vibrant. Nosferatu. I love how intentional this project was and how detail-oriented the technicals were here. There were specific design decisions that only work because of the lighting, like a certain smile or a longing from the distance. The Gothic format also leads to incredible creativity, and the odes to German Expressionism allow Eggers to have a lot of fun here and make an exciting, twisted product. Queer. Man. Hot diggity dog. What a scrumptious survey of lights. This film was a beautiful tribute to classic Hollywood with the kind of flair that only modern technology has to offer. It was moody and saturated, allowing the color to pop and the stars to offer the best they have. Gorgeous yellow hue that gave the film the atmosphere it needed, and it made the production feel like a movie, as Harry Styles would say. It wasn't naturalistic, it was heightened, and it took advantage of the art form. Santos. Funny enough, this one is kind of like the opposite of Queer. Purely naturalistic, but wonderful at what it does best. It's the most subtle out of any of the films nominated here, but I love the way the light just takes the backseat and guides the story softly. I feel like a broken record at this point, but natural lighting is really the best, especially when a tree wrinkles and the light shatters into many different pieces. I love it when it does that. The Brutalist. Jesus Christ, what a unified production this was. They're so magnetic the way they use light here because it's one of the only films I've seen that feels comfortable keeping their characters in darkness for such long periods of time. It makes everything go round story-wise, and each moment you see the character becomes much more dramatic. It's raw and authentic. It's one of the only films I've seen that makes lighting a genuine character in the film. Talking about lighting is just the best. It's my favorite of the technicals, and actually, when you push me on it, I can't really explain why, but it just is. Maybe it has something to do with it being something you can't fully create. It's not like paint, you know, you have to control it or divert it or capture it. The art is already there, you have to find it. The winner of this award exuded total control and made such a powerful image that it's impossible to deny. It's inspiring to watch and makes me want to push myself harder visually. The film that does that the most has to be... Brutalist. I'm absolutely floored with what Brady Corbet got to do here. This feels like a textbook masterclass, one that professors will be showing their students for years to come. It was dark and twisted. It perfectly encapsulated what the movie was going for thematically. What an absolute ride. Special shout out to Queer for having such audacious lighting as well. It took advantage of the medium and offered some really cool effects. I'll give it a silver turtle. This was a great year for the supporting performers, as it always is, because the supporting performers always get to have a little more fun than the leads. There's a clip where Dev Patel is talking, where he talks about the stillness that a leading actor has to have compared to the supporting performers. He talks about it like the lead is an upgrade, but I think about it more as a distinction between these two jobs.
I didn't really understand the art of subtlety before I met Danny, and he gave me this advice of you have to be still. And I came in and did this big audition because I knew I could make people laugh. That was my go-to thing. And he said, you're really good, you're funny, but if you want to lead this, we're going to need the audience to enter you through your eyes. So I need you to be still. And then we can go on a journey with you.
Many of these supporting performances contain the stillness of a leading person, and many of them contain the extracurriculars of the supporting. What's important is that they're all phenomenal in their own right. With that being said, here are the nominees. Ingenue Ellis, Exhibiting Forgiveness. This is a film ripe with performance opportunity, and Ingenue Ellis takes every bit of it into her possession. She's emotionally powerful, warm, inviting, and conflicted. Her entire dilemma is put to screen in a way where you can see all the heartache she goes through. Her range of emotion is what gets me here. To be able to display everything she displays is a testament to her ability as an actress, and there's a reason she's considered one of the greats working today. Aubrey Plaza, My Old Ass. Aubrey Plaza is one of those actresses that if I met her in real life, I would be completely unable to distinguish whether she's talking in a bit or if she's being completely serious with me. Her performance here, though, transcended every preconceived notion I had about her ability, her authenticity, and her emotional connection. She blew my socks off here in one of the most underrated movies of the year. She was lovingly playful and yet thoughtfully mature. She was able to do a lot with just her voice as well. A truly career-defining role, and one that'll stick with me. Special shout out to Megalopolis. I don't have her on this list for that, but what the hell? I mean, I just want to mention that performance, because what the hell? Carol Duarte, La Quimera. This is a performance that could slip under your radar if you're not careful. It wasn't overly dramatic or powerful. It was quiet, but its beauty was in its genuine description. She was able to show a lot with what little screen time she had, and as the story progressed, it became more powerful upon retrospection. Chaya Kadam, All We Imagine Is Light. Chaya Kadam gave what I imagine as a wise performance. It had such a satisfaction and a humble love of life. She elevated the role she was given and turned it into something more than its parts. Her chemistry with the other two actresses also recontextualized the film, and her ability to respond with what they were giving out gave the whole film more cohesion. Danielle Deadwyler, The Piano Lesson. In a movie that was hit or miss for me a little performance-wise, Deadwyler stole the show and nailed the role that she was given. She had the difficult task of being at a 10 emotionally speaking for a large part of the movie, so finding ways to make that energy diverse and interesting was a pleasure to watch on screen. It also made it so that her more quiet moments popped out and lit up the room. I hadn't heard from her much before this film, but I'll be hearing a lot more from her now. Divya Prabha, All We Imagine as Light. What a transcendent performance, one that makes you look at the place you're in life and wonder how it all fits together in your puzzle. She was filled with youthful exuberance and captured an innocence that makes you want to cry. Her scenes with Shohana Goswami were like watching fireworks go off. It's a performance that with time I've grown to appreciate more and more. I really hope to see more of her in the future. Felicity Jones, The Brutalist. Imagine dropping in the second half of a movie like a bomb and completely changing the dynamic of everything. Felicity Jones has that kind of power and a talent to go toe-to-toe with some of the best performances I've seen in my life. She was unyielding and gritty, definitely a bright spot this year. Joan Chen, Didi. I think that Joan Chen gave a very enlightening performance, one that, as someone growing older, gets me to think more about the trials of parenthood. She got more and more appealing as the film went on, each scene meticulously adding a layer to her character that made her more interesting. Her love spiced with exhaustion was a great emotional center and one that Chen realized with such maturity. Katie O'Brien, Love Lies Bleeding. As one of the more overlooked performances this year, I wanted to give a shout out to Katie O'Brien for such an exciting and pulpy performance. It was an engaging twist of paranoia and anger that perfectly matched what the film was going for. While I had some issues with how the story unfolded, her and Kristen Stewart made this film as good as it is, and O'Brien's slow fall from grace was incredibly exciting to watch. Margaret Qualley, The Substance. Speaking of pulpy, I think Margaret Qualley takes the cake for such a fun and spontaneous performance. Her overwhelming confidence, comedic timing, and charm make her absolutely magnetic to watch. She was so in her bag during the duration of this film. She knew exactly the tone the film was going for, and it allowed her to be far more emotive. Super spunky. Spunk, McSpunkle spunk. Monica Barbaro, A Complete Unknown. It really matters if you're able to play the guitar and sing in real life while you're doing your performance because it captures some sort of authenticity in what you're doing. When someone dubs for you, you have a realistic shot at making it look perfect. Real ones know, though, that greatest moments in music come from slight imperfection and a light that radiates through it. Monica Barbaro was wonderful to watch on screen because she seemed attuned to the power of performance and how the stage operates. Ayaka Shibutani, Evil Does Not Exist. This is a glorious and subtle performance, one that has to traverse scenes with either lots and lots of dialogue or almost none at all. In most cases, Shibutani did her acting as reacting, using her eyes to distinguish differences in the conversation. The Japanese are very good at reserved acting because they're very culturally reserved, but when you see the aptitude put into film, it works really, really well. Plays are made for extroverts, but the camera loves subtlety. Not to mention Shibutani nails the role in her own right. Her calm and collected nature enhanced the film incredibly. Sunita Rajwar, Santosh. The girl boss who flew too close to the sun. Rajwar did a great job of displaying power, of sticking to her guns, being charismatic, and at times, nightmarishly gruesome. The best part of her performance was how casual she played it, how matter-of-fact her moves were. She mimicked the way humans can fall if we allow ourselves to, if we justify our actions to the point of execution. Just a really haunting job, and probably the best part of the entire film. Zendaya, Dune Part 2. Now, Dune will copyright you if you put anything from the movie, so I'm not doing any clips. I've had enough of it. There are a few major reasons why I think Denis Villeneuve's Dune is even better than the original, the biggest one being Zendaya's incredible performance as Chani during the film. For those of you who haven't read the book, Chani is more of a helpless character, a misogynist interpretation, I would go so far to say, and when you put Zendaya in the movie, you can be sure that she's going to do the opposite of that. She had such an intensity for the role, such a determination, such a different voice from the original. She elevated the character in just about every way you can, and she was instrumental to the film's success and its level up from its predecessor. This was a really difficult award to give out because while there were so many great performances this year, it's not like one of them stood above the rest. There's about 5 performances that deserve this award, but I think the movie Highlander said it best when they said, "There can only be one." So, the winner is... Sunita Rajwar, Santosh. I know this film hasn't been seen by a lot of people, and I probably wouldn't have seen it myself if I hadn't been to a festival, but its performances are so good. Sunita Rajwar intimidated me into giving her this. She was just too scary. I had to do it. Special shout out to Danielle Deadweiler, Aubrey Plaza, and Joan Chen for their work in their respective roles. I can't decide between them, so they're all getting Silver Turtles. Good for them. They deserve all the love. But that's going to do it for me today. Let me know if there's any performances I missed. I nominated so many people, but maybe there's one. I mean, I didn't nominate Isabel Rossellini because she's barely in the movie. I don't even think she was that good. It didn't make sense to me. And also, there's been some comments by Nepo babies trying to not be Nepo babies that just pisses me off. It doesn't even matter if you're a Nepo baby. Just say that you got a little further because of it. But that's just me. That's just me. So editing is one of those aspects of film that I find hard to quantify. It's very hard for me to pin down what aspects of editing that I enjoy, and it's one of those things that reminds me how much I have to go when it comes to film criticism. In fact, I'd go so far to say editing is the art form I am the worst at when it comes to film. Here's the current criteria I base it on though. The pacing has a lot to do with it, like how fast or slow a film is. Does it rush? Does it drag? Does it feel like it's operating naturally? Another aspect is the tightness of the story. How valuable is each scene? What is the order on display? Not every scene has to be plot relevant in order to be valuable, but the editor has to know the innate quality of the moment and how it fits with the rest of the film. They have to have their finger on the pulse of the momentum, and at the end of the day, it's them and the directors that decide what shots get in and for how long they're in for. If anyone on this channel is an editor though, I'd love it if you gave me some more tips on what good editing looks like, what you look for, how you approach the medium, and that's for non-editors too, I guess. What do you think of as good editing? Let me know in the comments below, but for now, let's get to the nominees. Marco Costa, Challengers. Now this is some spunky editing. It had some great cinematography, sure, but the pure pacing, knowing when to go fast, and knowing when to hit the brakes, that makes this film feel like a story in control. I'm all about heightened emotions, and I find neutrality to be like death in art. So I like when a film is either really fast or really slow. This plays with the rhythm and keeps you engaged with the material. David Jansko, The Brutalist. Any film that can feel adequately paced at 3.5 hours of runtime is deserving of a nomination. Not only did the time rush by me, the film still felt monumental and of a scale that can only be captured in that amount of time. We're talking about 20 years of a man's life. It has to slow down and do it justice. Each scene was absolutely necessary, and it didn't have to rely on quick cuts to satisfy the audience. It was audacious and forced you to watch it in the way that it wanted to be watched. Taylor Levy, A Different Man. I think what I love about this film and the inherent comedy within it is a repetition of a certain situation. I don't want to spoil it unless you haven't seen the film, but those of you who have will know that there's something that happens over and over, and it just gets worse and worse. I have to admit, I love editing that keeps shots in for longer because we can really sit with the characters and live what they're feeling. This film does a lot of that, and it's all the better for it. Clemé Pinto, All We Imagine Is Light. The structure of this film is really well done, and while a lot of it is writing, the editing has a lot to do with it as well. The change in tone, shot selection, and pacing that comes from a change in scenery gives this film the magic it has, and it comes from the way this film was edited. I love the way the insert shots were inserted. It made the setting feel like a part of the movie. Joe Walker, Dune Part 2. If you want to know why the editing of this movie is so good, just look at the worm riding scene. Just look at it. Look at it. Look at it and come back to me. Tell me that's not good editing. Tell me with a straight face that's not good editing. And I'll eat a cotton ball. I'll eat a cotton ball because you cannot do that. You cannot look at me with a straight face and tell me that's not good editing. So yeah. There's just no way. There's no way. Ryusuke Hamaguchi and Azusa Yamazaki. Evil Does Not Exist. I watched this movie with my family, which was an immediate mistake because the first 10 minutes were just looking up at trees. There's a moment where a guy is smoking for like 3 minutes, up to the point where my dad asked me if I paused the movie. Pump that shit into my veins, okay? Any movie that can show me 10 minutes of trees absolutely knows how to edit a film. They just get it, man. Jin Sibalotus, Flow. Another example of a film that commits itself to long shots, building the atmosphere and the tension and showing the giantness of the world. It stays on the animal's emotions a second longer than you think it would, and doing that gives you the ability to ground yourself in what everybody is thinking. I think the key to authorship is standing behind what shots you take, taking fewer of them, and standing behind that direction. Those kind of decisions are made in the editing room where the director and the editor can formulate the film they have in front of them. It's a meditative process, at least for me it is. It's no wonder many of the greatest directors consider it their favorite activity. Watching these films has taught me what great editing looks like and how to properly handle a film. The one that displayed that the most is... Ryusuke Hamaguchi and Azusa Yamazaki. Evil does not exist. Look, I'm telling you, they just get it, okay? Some people get it, some people don't. I know it's kind of funny to talk about in that way, but in reality, film is about capturing life. And in the heart of life are these small, minute, quiet moments. I think editing like that is like visual poetry. It allows you to almost disassociate a little from a scene, and as you do that, your mind wanders, but the editing in the film guides your conversation that's going on in your head. It leads you to great discovery that way. Editing like that is in conjunction with the way film in general is supposed to hit you. It's supposed to help you know yourself and the world a little better. Special shout out to Challengers, which also displayed a one-of-a-kind ability on the editing room floor. It was breathtaking, and it deserves its silver turtle. There's been pushes recently for stunt coordinators or stunt men and women to get awards, and I think that makes a lot of sense to me. There's an art inside action films that make them successful. There's a reason why so many people want to watch them. But really, when I think about it, what makes action so different from dance? It's just a more violent form of visual choreography in which people are transfixed by others moving on the screen. Action is seen as quite a lowbrow kind of art form, which it is. I mean, that's not a good or a bad thing. But when you consider action sequences as dance, it can open your mind to how it's perceived and what value it has as an art form. So when I made this category, I expected it to be all choreography, all encompassing, specifically how these people move on screen. With that being said, here are the nominees. Devara, Part 1. There's been quite a few criticisms hurled at Devara like it's a rehash of Bahubali, and those criticisms are valid. I think what makes this piece of media stand out, though, is its commitment to its action sequences. They were bombastic, fun, incredibly high-octane, and as with many movies in Tollywood, they were immensely creative. One thing I love about Tollywood movies is that they have no interest in reality. They want to create larger-than-life stories or battles with gods. They can use this bombasticity to get away with anything, as long as it looks cool, and they certainly do that. Furiosa. Furiosa, to me, is a criminally underrated film. It's not, to me. I appreciated what they were trying to do, but I don't think they were quite able to execute it. I wish they went further away from action and tried to make a serious character drama within this world. Whenever longer action sequences would show up, it felt like something they put in there because it's a Mad Max movie and they had to do something. That being said, the action itself was ridiculously well done. One scene in particular is the reason this film was nominated. It was unrelenting, and it doesn't allow you to sit down for a second. Hundreds of Beavers. This isn't a crazy action film, or a dance film even, really. But what it is a tremendous ode to the silent film of the 1920s and 30s, with incredible visual sequences produced on a budget that you wouldn't think would even be possible. The amount they're able to accomplish visually on screen is breathtaking, and each sequence becomes more complicated and exciting than the last. It's not just a gimmick, either. Every area has a different approach to the choreography, and you're not stuck with the same shtick over and over again. It's both a reference to the past and a refreshing modern take. A lovely paradox. Monkey Man. I love Dev Patel. Let's just get that out of the way right now. When he makes something, I'm in. No questions asked. But there's a reason for it. He's highly committed to his art. This film reflects that. It's highly intense, at times brutal, creative, and exciting. It's a film built for choreography that happens to have a story. A good story considering how simple it is, but a choreography film nonetheless. That works to its advantage though, just by the sheer length of sequences it has. Dev Patel understands the mission, and he completed it wholeheartedly. Wicked. I have some issues with Wicked, there's no denying that, especially the direction. I think it's really, truly bad direction. The best part of it had to be the dance choreography. It was reminiscent of the original in the sense of its grandiose scale, but it also brought a distinct style that everyone was on board with. It played between boxy and smooth in a way that was visually appealing, allowing personalities like Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo to shine through. It took advantage of the gorgeous set design, with everybody interacting with the world they created. There's a lot of reasons this film was successful, and it starts with their commitment to dance justice. I've been really excited about this category because I think it's something that it deserves to be highlighted in modern cinema. It's one of those things that by highlighting it, by nominating it, it starts a conversation where studios recognize that and they start to put more effort and more quality into these sequences. Because it's impossible to talk about modern cinema without these kind of visual dances that most people are there to see. It's something that everyone thinks about but nobody really categorizes. These are all films that deserve to be rewarded for the stuff they've done, but at the same time, most of them will go away empty-handed. It's pretty hard getting a Golden Turtle. It's a pretty serious distinction. Who gets that distinction? Well, I guess it would have to be... Hundreds of Beavers. The movie's a creative juggernaut. It has no dialogue, so it just pounds you with excellent visuals, constantly. It was exciting, hilarious, and it deserves a little more love. If you haven't heard of it, you can find the movie on Amazon Prime. At least in the US you can. Monkey Man also deserves some love. It's a passion project where you can tell it's a passion project by what you can see on screen. I'll hand it a silver turtle like I would a firm handshake. Music. Oh, I just got back from hugging my cat, and now I'm ready to go. Music is one of these categories where I finally feel comfortable judging people on it. It's something that I do have some technical ability in. I played saxophone and clarinet in college. I know some flute, but I suck at it. I know some piano, but I suck at it. I know some guitar, but I suck at it. I'm pretty good at the first two, though, enough to be passionate about it. Oh, I forgot. I play a mean recorder. Don't get backed in a corner with me playing recorder. But yeah, I know a lot about theory due to my time as a jazz musician, so I always have a soft spot for film scores. I think they make or break a film, they turn an amateurish production into a professional one, and they elevate everything that's going on screen. My favorite thing that I find about music is that it's able to capture certain emotions that feel incomprehensible to display with language alone. There's a rawness to it that adds another layer to what you're watching. And this year was an incredible year as far as music goes, one of the best in a while. Usually there's only 4 or 5 nominations I remember in a given year, but this year has quite a few nominations actually. With that being said, here they are. Cristobal Tapia de Veer, Baby Girl. Here is a haunting, sexy ride of a score, creative and thematic, in your face and up your crotch. Using the heavy breathing as an instrument was an incredibly successful position because it made the film seem bigger than it was and the drama further heightened. You know, I think I've heard a concept like it before once or twice, but never for the whole film and never to this degree. Its originality made it stand out, and when I hear it, I know for a fact what film it came from. It's pre-iconic. I think it'll end up being highly influential. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Challengers. If I had to take a bullet for Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, I probably wouldn't. But I would hesitate, and that's more than I can say about any other musician. I think this is one of the best scores of all time. I truly do. It's pompy and perfect for a director like Luca Guadagnino to get his hands on. Not only is it an absolute blast, it artistically builds the personal stakes in a way that makes the film go like a runaway train. It's not just that, though. Loof, I don't know how to pronounce that, but Loof is one of the most methodical tracks I've ever heard. It's impossible to get it out of my head. It's haunting and meditative. What an overall powerful score. It's unbelievable what they did here. Hans Zimmer, Dune Part 2. This film not being allowed in the Academy Awards is certifiable horse shit. Hans Zimmer, in a spot where I thought he couldn't get anything else creatively, where I thought the times had passed him by, made me look like a damn fool again. The music he creates centering the Fremen in the desert are of particular importance. These scores weren't part of the original film, and yet they perfectly recontextualize the story. I won't ever doubt this guy again, at least for the next 5 years. Iko Ishibashi, Evil Does Not Exist. A real kinetic and contemplative piece, this score had ample opportunity to assert itself just by the nature of the film. With so many instances of still shots and little dialogue, it was able to guide your thoughts and lead you to restful meditation. It had little nodes of fear popping in like stepping on a thorn while playing outside. It perfectly encapsulated the danger and beauty of nature, setting the scene for the rest of the film beautifully. Richard Zalupe and Jin Sibilotis, Flow. Flow's score is great because it has such a variety of ability. It was at times curious, at times epic, at times ethereal. It's another example of a score, like in Evil Does Not Exist, where so much of the film is without dialogue that music is necessary for connecting the visuals to the emotional theme. Like many aspects of the film, it reminded me of an independent game. Each area was quick, moving on to the next. The music reminded me of the way you can get sucked into a game, and you accidentally lose the next 4 hours of your life. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Queer. I can't believe these guys made music to this degree twice in 1 year. The music is such an important part of this film because it perfectly blends the old school styling with modern filmmaking ideals. Some of the needle drops you can feel in your gut when they hit. Like, oh, I can't believe how hard that hit me. The track Pure Love in particular though, was spellbinding. I'll be like taking a walk and all of a sudden that score hits me like a truck. What emotional resonance that score contains. I feel wiser just by listening to it. Martin Dierkov, David Holmes, and Brian Irvine, The Apprentice. What keeps me coming back to the soundtrack, because it's basically a soundtrack, is how empty it is. Empty rock, meaningless adrenaline, poppy songs that you feel like represent the character of Trump in a very real way. He likes the idea of music, but he has no idea why it matters in any way, shape, or form. He just wants to make the most noise. He wants to do what feels good. The film does a good job of showing the shell that he is, and the soundtrack is perfect for complementing that vision. Daniel Blumberg, The Brutalist. This is one of the most exciting new pieces of music I've listened to in a very long time. Reminiscent of the older historical epics from David Lean, this score takes that and twists it like a knife in your liver. Dark, exciting, epic, dark again. It brings to light the darkness of the American dream and what all of that entails. It's truly a character within the film, interacting with the story in a very real way. It highlights the tension and experiments with your feelings. It's one of the most haunting scores I've ever listened to, and it's probably another one of those scores that scraps the best of all time. John Powell and Stephen Schwartz, Wicked. Listen, like I said, I have some real issues with this film, but the actual adaptation of the music I think was incredibly well done. Cynthia Erivo in particular gave a vocal performance that would shatter a bunch of wine glasses in your kitchen. Its iconicism is hard to deny, and while I understand if music theater isn't your thing, it's definitely well executed within the genre. I'll be damned if I'm not humming the soundtrack to myself in the car. Defying Gravity is a banger, and I actually like the way they extended it. I know it's a hot take. While I was writing out this video, I listened to the scores themselves. It was awesome, and it made me remember that I forgot how great it is to listen to these by themselves. I used to only listen to music scores. I wouldn't even listen to real music while I was growing up. I wouldn't do that now, but I should get them back in rotation. Film scores are a great connector for film fans because it's only the real nerds that get into those kind of things. If I meet someone and they know a lot about film scores, it's like I've instantly made a friend. So many of the film scores this year will become topics of conversation for years to come, but there can only be one winner of the Golden Turtle Award. And that score would be... Challengers and The Brutalist. Oh shit, the first dual award winner of the Golden Turtle Awards? How can that be? Well, this was such a hard category to choose, and then I thought to myself, actually, this whole awards thing is bullshit anyway. They both deserve it, so they're both gonna get it. If you don't like it, then you can fight me in the parking lot of a Chili's. Sometimes there's just two films deserving of Golden Turtle Awards, and these two scores will be talked about very highly for a very long time. They're both the best scores I've listened to since Parasite in 2019, so I think they're deserving. Special shout out to Queer though, that score is just ridiculous. It's so good, it's a felony. Of course I'll give it the Silver Turtle, and many other years it would win a gold. This is probably a weaker year, I'd say, for actors and actresses as a whole, but it's not without some truly groundbreaking performances. Many of the performances on this list led me to completely change my opinion on the respective actor's career and everything that came before. They took daring risks and gave original takes that surprised audiences. It's hard to quantify what makes a great performance, right? Because you can be daring and transformative, and at the same time you can do none of these things and still be just as good. I think what matters most is your ability to tap into the emotion of a character or a scene and how well you're able to convey that emotion. But it can be difficult to isolate what makes something great. These actors tapped into some greater emotion and touched me from the other end of the screen. Here are the nominees for Best Actor in a Leading Role. Adrien Brody, The Brutalist. This is, if I'm allowed to say something like this, maybe the most emotionally powerful performance I've ever seen in my life. The amount of dedication it takes to lead through a film like this is remarkable, and Brody captured resentment, pain, and hope in a way that left my jaw on the floor. A character like this, I can't imagine how much it takes out of you. He was constantly bombarded with complications emotionally and physically, and yet he was still able to give it his all. There was so much under the surface, and at the same time there was so much above the surface. He was a dual threat, an insanely qualified actor. Daniel Craig, Queer. Another one of these performances that I was just floored by. I've never seen Daniel Craig do something quite like this. I mean, he had his quirks in Knives Out movies and Logan Lucky, but this is just on another level. He reaches a depth of vulnerability and love that can't be ignored, a pain so deep it makes your skin crawl in your seat. There's a scene where he's just looking out into space, and it's probably one of the greatest things I've ever seen. He's got such a unique charisma, and I hope he continues in this direction. Josh Hartnett, Trap. Talk about a man who understands the kind of movie he's in. Hartnett turns his dial up to 11, making himself infinitely more charismatic than he was in the past and making it impossible to take your eyes off him. He leans into the character at every opportunity and uses Shyamalan's unique style to create a self-help serial killer I hadn't seen on the screen before. Charming, funny, and original. A great combination. Josh O'Connor, La Chimera. This man is filled with so much whimsy. He's so curious and intelligent, and it comes off remarkably well in a film like this. His gentle nature and disheveled attitude come across wonderfully on screen, and it's very easy to connect with him emotionally. He's just got a charisma that you don't run into every day, and I love the way he holds himself. It's such a remarkably different role from his work in Challengers as well, so it's nice to see that level of diversity pop up right away. It's kind of like when I watched Florence Pugh for the first time in 2019, bursting on the scene with two hot films I couldn't take my eyes off of. Sebastian Stan, A Different Man. Oh, how I've waited to talk about Sebastian Stan. He revolutionized the way I think about him twice in the same year. With this role, his cowardice got to me a lot, and his anger was vivid. His comedic timing was perfectly well done. He has a tendency toward the subtle, which was perfect for this kind of role. He said so much behind the eyes. Sebastian Stan, The Apprentice. Like I said, this was a hell of a year for Sebastian Stan. When I first heard about him playing the role of Donald Trump, I damn near thought this movie was a throwaway. It turns out I couldn't have imagined a better actor to play this part. Do you know how hard it is to play Donald Trump without it seeming like a knockoff impression? How do you take a character like him seriously? Stan had an answer to all of these questions, and he gutted me with his responses. Just like Jeremy Strong's character, you were both disgusted by his lack of humanity and strangely sympathetic for a guy who comprehends so little about human connection. And then you get re-disgusted for feeling sympathetic. It's a performance so good you start to spiral out of control. Timothée Chalamet, A Complete Unknown. While this isn't my favorite performance of his, I'm starting to think that nothing will top his 2019 performance in Little Woman, but it doesn't take his best to receive a nomination here. Many people are starting to compare him to a young Leo DiCaprio, which I think is a very apt comparison because he's been putting out excellent work consistently for a long time now. He's got popular appeal and looks, and his films tend to work at the box office. The film industry has loads of stars. People just don't go to movies because of them. Stars have to be savvier now and pick better projects, which they do. What does that have to do with Bob Dylan? I don't know. But Timmy was good, and that's the important thing. Timothée Chalamet, Dune Part 2. I struggled to give him a double nomination here because neither of his performances are as good as Sebastian Stan's in my opinion. I do think both of them are great performances though, especially his work in this film here. Like many of the actors in the original Dune, I thought he was a little wooden, but in this film his charisma and ability just spiked over the top. His speeches were resonant, his chemistry stronger, his weariness well documented, on every level a triumph. Perfect for this film and a great leading man. Definitely some of the best work he's ever done. So like I said, there's not very many options here, but at the very top it's still rich with talent. Lead performers have so much to carry on their shoulders because it's not like they just have to act every day on camera. They also have an expectation to lead the other actors around them and respond to the director's messaging faster. The top guy in this category was responsible for so much of the product on screen, and he created a powerhouse of a character that electrified every scene he was in. The winner is... Daniel Craig, Queer. This might not just be one of the best performances of the year, it could be one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. He's just that strong, he's undeniable. It's easily the greatest work he's ever done, far better than his other stuff. As for the Silver Turtle, I think I'm going to put Adrian Brody inside of a Sebastian Stan sandwich. Those three performances are lightning in a bottle, and I think it's impossible to talk about film in 2024 without them. I brought a brewski to this one, so you can tell it's getting serious. It's a little dangerous to do so because a little inside info, I'm shooting 5 of these things, so whatever happens, I might have like 1 beer or 2 beers or 3 beers or 4 beers or 5 beers or 6 beers or 7 beers or 8 beers or 9 beers or 10 beers. Whatever the amount, you'll see the damage in about 5 days. Some films transport you to a place you never thought you could go and help you see the beauty in a place you previously couldn't understand. One of my favorite things to do in life is to travel, and there's about a million reasons to that, but some of them are the intense learning experience, the breaking down of your cultural biases, appreciating your own life in a new way, and allowing that culture to change you. I see film as a miniature travel experience, one that dares your way of life and gives you a new layer of empathy. The area the story takes place in determines the personality of the conflict and gives you a clue into how these characters see the world. That's the case in genre set design or on-location shooting, and so for that reason I'm going to include both of these into this category here. They both fulfill the same purpose whether they are found or created. It all has to do with how the director sees the area, how it impacts the story, or how it contextualizes the culture from which it came from. These are the nominees for set design/location shooting. All We Imagine as Light. This film is in many ways a complicated love letter to the city of Mumbai, and so the depiction of that city is very important for the story. It's a beautiful city, one of the busier cities in the world, but the film took special care to find the quiet side as well. It was able to capture the solitary nature of a city also, like that there were so many people, but because of that, it's like nobody has the energy to care about the strangers around them. This film had 2 major locations though, and I thought the beach was even better. Capturing the rural landscape of India is almost like cheating because it's one of the most beautiful geographic locations to ever exist. The area was great for interpreting the existential conflict of the characters, as many beaches often are. Conclave. I mean, who doesn't like the look of old churches? There's a certain level of architectural greatness that can only come from a king torturing poor people for over 10 years in the name of God. There's such open spaces, and the movie took advantage of it to create a more epic and realized conflict. It's both beautiful and cold, which makes sense for a story like this because it recognizes the way these cardinals have to make decisions. Many of them ignore how they feel in favor of strategy for the sake of uplifting the institution in a way they see fit. Dune, Part 2. It's one of those movies where I don't have to tell you what makes the production design so great. I mean, look at it! Its landscape is entirely epic, each of its sets taking great care to feed in the story, all of them having logical and cultural implications. I know I've called a lot of things its own character here, but come on. Like, the desert is clearly its own character here. It lives and breathes its final and all-knowing. It's the entire conflict, and it's shot with that in mind. Evil does not exist. In order to craft a story around the sanctity of a forest, you must first go out and show what makes it so special in the first place. This film took great care to appreciate the scenery, philosophize on what makes it so beautiful, represent the ecosystem, and see what part humans play in it. There's multiple instances where the camera just shows you the forest and nothing else for minutes at a time. It's jaw-droppingly beautiful. Hundreds of Beavers. Hundreds of Beavers is a great example of a cross between real-world locations and actually designed sets. The melding between the two is ridiculously well done. It's like they're able to manipulate the scenery as if it were Play-Doh. It's cartoonish, but deliberate in its own right. It's masterfully well realized, especially for the kind of budget these guys were working with. La Chimera. This is another one of these movies where it's basically cheating. It's the Italian countryside, of course it's going to be beautiful. But even indoors as well, the area does service to the kind of world these people are working with. It's like everyone's already lived, everything's already done, what's there left to do? There's only moving forward with each other. The sets do a great job of providing that clash between the ancient and the modern. The contrast is very exciting. Maria. This one's very similar to Conclave in that I just really like looking at old, rich buildings. I have serious issues with the way wealth is portrayed in Pablo Larraín films, but the way he shoots it, I mean damn, they look cool as hell. It's not just that though, to be fair. Maria's home is ripe with interesting objects, the color is spellbinding, the designs are magnificent. It's something you can tell took a lot of time to put together. Nosferatu. Gothic horror is back, baby. I was nervous about Eggers' last film, because after The Northman bombed harder than any movie could bomb, I wasn't sure if he would ever get real money again. This was a great example of a mid-budget film operated the right way, and the money's all on the screen. The town, the castle, the village, all of these were meticulously crafted and exciting to look at. An enjoyable, well-done production. Queer. Man, this set design just blew me away. One could even say it was fully surrealized. It was a glorious interpretation of Latin America in old-school production with popping color, iconic imagery, and a glorious attention to detail. I found myself forgetting to listen to the characters talk sometimes because the area around them was just so well designed. Each area was distinct and handled with great care. They knew what they had, too. There's a reason they spent several connective shots just watching Daniel Craig walk down the city. There's nothing more gorgeous than that. The Brutalist. The man is building his life's work. He's portrayed as this genius of design, so this film had to nail that concept. And nail it they did with an awe-inspiring design. But of course the majority of the film is the lead up to it. So in the meantime they leave you with other gorgeous scenery to deal with. It does a lot with seemingly barren textures, simple areas, and empty areas. With these empty areas, just the right placement of a person can feel striking. Wicked. I hated the lighting and the color correction in this film, but I think the worst thing that they did was that they ruined one of the best set designs I've seen in a big budget film in a long time. It was slick and exciting, inventive, had good movement, it worked great with the dance numbers, it was iconic and yet somehow made itself different from the original film. I thought it was really well done. One of my favorite things I've done on this channel is that for the intro footage, I walk around wherever I go and film whatever I see. I just love the way the camera responds to the environment. Like, how does it look here? Does it look good? Does it look bad? How does it look this way? How do I feel about this? Oh, that was terrible, let me try it this way. And so I think the set design isn't just set design itself, but the way it's handled in the film. Of course, better set designs or locations lead to that being a more satisfying task, but at the end of the day, it comes down to execution. The winner of this award had a production that felt like I was consuming visual art at all times. It never dropped the throttle. And that winner is... Queer. I'll reiterate again how fantastical the color was here. Just unbelievable from a production standpoint. It made the world so beautiful and it perfectly placed you into the subjective mind of the character. Special shout out to Hundreds of Beavers. That set design was incredibly inventive as well. I have no choice but to deliver it a silver turtle. Blocking is another one of those categories that doesn't get enough attention because I don't know if it's any one person's job to do blocking specifically. It's one of those aspects of film that contributes to the overall visual quality more than a typical audience member would expect. It's like a combination of two different art forms. Every dancer knows the importance of body movement and every visual artist knows the importance of spatial awareness. When you think about a truly beautiful film, you come up with Barry Lyndon, for example, a ridiculously and meticulously well-blocked film. In fact, some of the greatest directors to ever live simply speak in vignettes. They know how powerful it can be to place someone correctly in camera. I've said this in videos before, but I'll say it again here. Filmmakers who don't take blocking seriously aren't good filmmakers. It's just as simple as that. With that said, here are the nominees. Challengers. Spatial awareness is such a deliberate part of the trichotomy in this film, and I think that's what makes it such a serious blast. The way they're placed on screen always tells you something about the position they're in with each other, or how they feel in a given moment. Not that the characters aren't telling you, it's a very in-your-face kind of movie. The blocking is very upfront, only adding to the excitement. Conclave. The congregation of cardinals is taken very seriously here, and I think the director had a lot of fun with placement in large groups. Whenever these guys were huddled together, gossiping, it was always a well-managed scene. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the reason I nominated this one is because of a few stills from the movie I saw on the internet after the fact. I mean, damn, it just looks good. Exhibiting forgiveness. Like I've said previously about Titus Kaphar in the lighting video, you can tell this guy is a photographer. He's one of those vignette kind of directors where everyone sits in their individual space, and if somebody moves, it's a big deal. It's one of my favorite styles of filmmaking, and it's one that takes spatial awareness more seriously than anyone else. Sometimes you say each frame is like a painting, but no, each frame is literally like a painting here. I can't believe how overlooked this film is in the national conversation. Hundreds of Beavers. A film that takes a lot from the silent films of old has to take spacing into account. There's no choice, it's like the backbone of the whole movie. The comedy relies on spacing, the visuals rely on spacing, the danger relies on spacing. When you have no words, something like blocking becomes tantamount to success. And the film is very successful in that regard, so it contains great blocking. On a technical level, Hundreds of Beavers knew exactly what it was doing, and while the blocking wasn't used for any character poignancy, it executed what it wanted to a perfect degree. I saw the TV glow. I saw this movie a lot later than most people did, and when I did, it blew me away in just about every sense of the word. Spellbinding is what it was, and its attention to detail spacing-wise was a massive part about it. These characters are pretty lethargic by nature, so their placement became a big deal because it's not like they were going anywhere. Also, it's not just people here. Certain props and pieces of the set were placed perfectly, adding to the overall charm. La Chimera. This film had a different kind of blocking because it contained a lot of movement within it. Italians don't sit still, everybody knows that. But the way everyone crisscrosses the scene was so dynamic, it was its own art within itself. Like Italy, the film places a lot of importance in the movement, and you can see a lot of unified movement here. When people move together, that's important to note. When someone moves separately, that's important to note as well. Either way, the blocking's oversighted with just as much meticulation as a less chaotic film. Queer. I think when a filmmaker finds himself in a bar set, they just love to block for it. It reminds me a lot of that Nighthawk painting a while ago. It's a good painting for sure, but everybody knows what the spacing represents. Luca Guadagnino's already proven his ability to block well, and it's like he's in his bag at this point. He's unconscious, as a basketball player would say. Just free real estate. I think when a film fan sees great blocking, it makes their stomach drop. It can, in some cases, be just as powerful as acting, and of course it makes a great assist leader as well. There's so many great examples of blocking out there, and I think it adds an entire layer to your understanding as a film fan when you make an active plan to look for it. I appreciate all the choices I have in front of me, but they're blah only blah one, and the blah 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 is... Exhibiting forgiveness. I know nobody watched this movie. Well, you should. You're really not going to get a whole lot better than this. Although this is only his first film, Kaphar staged it like a master. I really hope he makes something again. Special shout out to I Saw the TV Glow. I gotta give you your flowers. You were just exquisite, and an easy silver turtle. If I'm being 100% completely, truthfully, fully, and honestly honest, the effects industry over the last 5 years has been one of the worst I've ever seen. Scratch that. The worst I've ever seen. It's not like the effects have been terrible per se, but there's no excitement to push the boundaries past what they've gone before. There's no imagination. Every step forward is like watching a CGI lion that looks boring act boring. It doesn't even look real. It looks so bad. But on a different level, and I blame Marvel for this completely, audiences don't really give a shit whether films look good or not. Not as long as their favorite character's on screen anyway. Studios have been recognizing this, and they've been taking their foot off the gas for a while. It's a shame because it's the only thing these blockbuster films are capable of doing that smaller films can't, is have good visuals. They have the money to put it all on the table and push the boundaries from what we can see in cinema. Some of these movies create new technology. I mean, we wouldn't have motion capture the way we know it unless Peter Jackson and Andy Serkis made the decision to in 2002. I see shit from 2007 that looks about as good as it does now. What a fucking disgrace. And I'll tell you, it has nothing to do with the animators themselves, and everything to do with how they're treated. So I don't have a lot of nominations this year, to say the least. There's some good stuff here, though, some stuff that deserves your attention. With that being said, here are the nominees for Achievement in Visual Effects. A Better Man. This film had a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of stuff going on outside the dance sequences that elevated the film to a certain extent. It kept the material engaging, and it especially enhanced the movement of Robbie Williams' internal strife. I usually prefer more practical effects, but it makes sense that they would use computer technology considering they had to work around a real monkey that whole time. That in and of itself should be considered an achievement. Alien Romulus. Speaking of practical effects, I'm a big fan of how many practical effects they used here. The aliens came off great. You know, it wasn't my favorite movie, but I thought they were romantic with how they treated the original films. They also created their own invention, one of my favorite monsters from any of these movies, and one I hope they move towards more in the future. My only issue is that one of the scenes felt like a deepfake, and it took me out of the film, the way those deepfakes always do. Beetlejuice. Hot take. Well, I don't know how hot of a take it is, but I thought the set design in Beetlejuice was not very good, actually. It was just a rehash of those old original sets. The only new thing they did was kind of lame and just didn't sit right with me. The effects, though, I thought they did a lot of cool things between those ghouls. They were inventive and funny, they utilized old school technology, and they added something to the original mystique. Dune Part 2. You will believe a man can ride a worm. That should have been the tagline. I'd watch that movie even faster if that was the tagline. But yeah, this movie's the perfect example of how you're supposed to use visual effects. They weren't just well used, they were cohesive and they had a larger vision in mind. When you see an image from Dune, you'll know just from the design what movie it came from. Villeneuve's always been good with that kind of thing. Hundreds of Beavers. This film is a perfect example of how to handle visual storytelling on a small budget, and how that can even elevate the film that you're trying to produce. It's not that this movie has great work for its size, it's that it has great work, period. Because they were so strapped, this film was forced to be more original, more quirky, and to lean into its goofiness. Like Dune, it had its own sense of style and its own coherent vision. It's just a lovely looking film. So yeah, the lineup this year is pretty much shite. I look back at films 10 years ago and at least they were trying to push technology. Now it's just blah. I'll say this is one of the easiest categories to do this year, with one clear standout and one clear second place. You can probably guess them by the way I phrased my nominations. Congratulations, Dune Part 2. You are the winner of this year's Golden Turtle Prize. In all seriousness, that worm riding scene from Dune 2 is one of the greatest achievements in cinema to ever exist. It was purely fantastic. Special shout out to Hundreds of Beavers for its visual prowess. It must have taken so much work to pull something off like that. It'll get a silver turtle. Coffee. It's coffee time. The biggest thing I noticed looking at the lead actress' performances this year compared to the lead actor ones is that there's more range to these performances, more range of genres or approaches or personalities. It's hard to compare these women because they're operating in such different atmospheres, but that variety is what makes this category interesting. It reminds me of the differences in fashion by gender, like when women wear all these incredibly different displays of themselves and men just basically wear a variation of a suit. It could be a different colored suit, but it's still just a suit. Women can also wear a suit as well as other things, so like, damn, they got men on the Venn diagram principle. Their circle eats man's circle. They just have a bigger circle. And of course, bigger circles are more fun because there's more room to play. This is probably true of most forms of expression. Men tend to limit themselves more than women in acting or writing or life in general, and so their performances reflect that as well. This year's got an exciting list of actresses in a leading role, so here are the nominees. Angelina Jolie, Maria. I was racking my brain to think of any good movies that Angelina Jolie has ever been in, to which I've come up with the answer of none. It's funny because I never felt that way until I saw her performance in this movie here. She's got wicked charisma, and it never felt like she didn't have the aptitude for greatness. It's just not a road she decided to go down. Jolie was transcendent here, giving a vulnerable, exciting take on a character that allows her to be larger than life. It was a valuable and important performance. Cynthia Erivo, Wicked. Erivo gave a fantastic reimagining of the character Elphaba, taking what was originally an allegory for the Jewish experience and flipping it into her perspective as a black woman. Her vocal prowess was downright amazing, and she carried the film into the juggernaut that it is. There would be no Wicked without her. It certainly wasn't the directing or anything that kept this movie afloat. Demi Moore, The Substance. I mean, everybody loves this, right? We can all agree? Demi Moore was so many things here, from comedically brilliant to emotionally raw to insanely crazy. She wipes through these things with ease, and her determination to give a great performance bubbled to the surface. Her energy was contagious too. You could tell she was enjoying herself, so it made you enjoy her performance all the more. Connie Khosrouti, All We Imagine Is Light. Khosrouti was very good at speaking with her eyes. She was mundane and came across as insightful and super intelligent. Every move she made felt complicated and well thought out. It's like she was in a crisis because she couldn't think her way out of these emotional issues. Her chemistry with the rest of the cast was amazing, especially the way she handled reactions to what other people were saying. They say that acting is reacting. Well, if it is, then I say Khosrouti should reenact the React Act. Lily Rose Depp, Nosferatu. To quote a friend on Letterboxd, Orson Welp, I apologize, Lily Rose Depp. I was not familiar with your game. What she did that excited me the most here was she put herself out there and experimented with the role. She made some decisions that, if handled incorrectly, could have come across as downright terrible, but because of her level of commitment, she pushed through to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Her physical body acting was exciting, like some of the convulsions she's doing I've never seen before. I really hope she follows this up well. Mikey Madison, Honora. Mikey Madison's got so much energy here, she's such a unique force. I hope to see more of her in the future. Because this film is so different at certain parts, she has a lot to balance on her head. She has to be the through line through everything while being charismatic, and that takes a lot of skill to do so. Her comedic timing is great, but her vulnerability speaks for itself. Certain scenes, especially near the end, will stick with me for a while, and that has everything to do with the way Madison handled this character. Nicole Kidman, Baby Girl. This is a very underrated performance to me, one that I think should be receiving a lot more love, and I think it has to do with us becoming numb to Nicole Kidman's ability as an actress. She was electrically charged, a savant of knowing when to keep it cool and when to ramp it up. I just think she's such a unique voice as well. Her speech cadence, her awkward sexiness. I literally have no concept of what's going on in her head. It makes her so magnetic. Shahana Goswami, Santosh. Santosh is a film I think deserves a little more love. A film that relies so heavily on Goswami's performance and her ability to play the straight woman in all the chaos happening around her. Her slow transition from victim to victimizer was perfectly documented. It seems like Goswami was in control of every decision she made in the final product. Zendaya, Challengers. I'm tired of this movie getting overlooked. It makes no sense to me. People keep calling this a weak movie year, but no, it's just weak movies thrown in the awards discussion. This performance changed everything I thought about what Zendaya's ceiling is. She brought attitude and determination to a juicy role and leaned into what the movie was trying to offer. Sometimes I felt like the movie saw what she was doing and started to bend to her. It was a performance that might end up being discussed more than every Best Actress nomination this year. But I don't care. I don't care. I found it difficult to write about acting any more than I have. It's my fourth go-around doing this, and I have started to run out of adjectives. I hope it was alright, though. There's a lot of performances here that deserve thoughtful acknowledgement. Every one of them does, really, otherwise I wouldn't be nominating them. Actually, every performance ever does, but who has time for that? I mean, I guess I just have to stick to the good ones. And while there were many, from that there can only be one. Who can be the one? Well, let's open ourselves up and find out. Zendaya, Challengers. Oh, well, will you look at that? In Electric Winner, Zendaya deserves a win just for her reaction faces alone. I think she cracked something close to iconic here. Her performance was so much larger than life, and yet it captured so much of the human experience. It's like something Luca Guadagnino told Denis Villeneuve on Directors. Zendaya is comfortable making decisions that could be perceived as unlikable, but she straddles that line to the point where it becomes irresistible. Special shout out to Demi Moore, an extremely talented actress and one that I'm so glad is getting her a flowers this award season. She's such an exciting person to give the silver turtle. Okay, so originally there was going to be a different introduction for this video. What I had thought in my introduction was that I was saying I didn't know the difference between sound editing and sound mixing, and I thought I was just kind of joking. I thought I actually kind of did know what sound editing and sound mixing was. So when I made this video originally, I told you guys the difference between sound editing and sound mixing. And it turns out I was completely wrong. So now I'm back here after getting to the editing room and finishing the whole video, and I have a different introduction for you because I had to look it up. I found something on Reddit. This guy named Steel Wool, I'm giving you credit for this. Thank you for helping me out. Thank you for telling me the difference between sound editing and sound mixing. And now, because I don't have much time, I'm just going to read what this guy said on Reddit, which is absolutely true. It's 100% fact because it's on Reddit. So this is the difference between sound editing and sound mixing. And I really like the way that he comes up with the explanation. In layman's terms, sound editing is about collecting the sounds needed for a film. Sound mixing refers to what is done after they are collected. The sound editing category used to be known as sound effect editing, which is actually the more apt name. When scenes are shot, typically the focus is almost entirely on getting the dialogue and staging down pat. It is left to the sound editors to put in other noise to complement the spoken words. This could be ambient sound like an air conditioner or the approach of a distant train. Sound mixing then refers to the post-production after sounds are already inserted. The most essential goal is to meld the sound seamlessly with the recorded dialogue. It could mean making the train actually seem distant or adding reverb to a bird's squawk to create tension in a scene. It also includes matching the audio levels of dialogue recorded at different times. So there you have it. Sound editing refers to obtaining the necessary sounds. Sound mixing is about layering them in the final product. Now, with that being said, here are the nominees, by a guy who didn't know the difference between sound editing and sound mixing. A Different Man. I think because the lead character is always in such an anxious and fearful state, his senses are heightened and thus he's paying attention to every sound around him. The film takes great advantage of this, using a wonderful array of sounds to paint a picture of his situation and hammer home how the character is feeling. Each drop of water in his apartment, each squeak of a door, these moments are heightened to an almost surrealist degree. It's a major factor in the film's success, especially in the opening act of the film. All we imagine as light. A lot of this movie relies on the character's relationship to the city lifestyle, which is handled brilliantly with the sound here. I've often said the setting of a place can be a character. Well, how do you create a character? The sound of a movie gives the place its personality. It inhabited the world they were in, making it so noise or lack of noise was a major tonal factor and shifted how a conversation was going to go. Challengers. This is maybe a smooth brain nomination, but I like it when the tennis ball goes pop. They did some serious justice to the actual game of tennis, and while Luca had previously stated that it wasn't his priority, clearly the sound mixing was. It services the adrenaline-seeking nature of the story quite well. Dune, Part 2. Sci-fi is always a goldmine for sound design, isn't it? Especially sound mixing. The clashing of space swords, the rupturing of force fields, they all make such satisfying sounds. But again, like all we imagine as light, sound is an incredible environmental tool. The desert, the sand, these parts of the film were thought through meticulously, and the final sound was a massive part of that process. Evil does not exist. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, so I'm not gonna. The forest is an environment, so you know how I feel about movies that treat it with great care. The important thing about this one is the sheer amount of time that's dedicated to listening to the forest, and the sheer amount of highlighting the sound design receives. I think in this film more than any other film this year, the sound is tantamount to the story. Its entire plot is encapsulated by a love of the forest, and this film spends a significant amount of its runtime reminding you of its beauty. The sounds are meditative and beautiful. They are why people live among the trees. Flow. As is the case with the music, because this film relies so heavily on non-verbal storytelling, technical aspects like the sound design end up floating up to the surface. I feel like animals are naturally more attuned to sounds than we are as humans, so it's only natural in this film that the animals are more reactionary to these sounds, and interact more with these sounds. It's not the sounds themselves that are particularly well mixed, but the way they're edited in the film is what makes them special. Nosferatu. This film has a lot of sounds. A lot of sounds. It's rich with interesting moments of squeaks and grunts, and it ties them all together well, especially in Count Orlok's mansion. I already said this in my review of the movie, but there's so much going on from a sound perspective, it's like Eggers treats it the same way he would dialogue. The mixing is incredible, and it's absolutely vital for creating the gothic surrealist landscape that Eggers was trying to build. It's an excellent feature. Sound has some seriously underrated magical effects. When I think about the art form, I think about the movie that came out a couple years ago called Come On, Come On with Joaquin Phoenix, in which he basically just takes a microphone and records the sound wherever he goes. I always thought that'd be a great way to walk through life. Sound can be so meditative and engaging whenever you isolate it. Unfortunately, I don't have a shotgun mic like Joaquin Phoenix did in that movie. I just have a stupid lav mic that I hold to my chin like an asshole. But these nominated films aren't assholes, because they have good sound. The least asshole out of these non-assholes is... Evil does not exist. It was a tough one, I have to admit, between this one and Nosferatu. And it really just comes down to personal preference from what you're looking for in the medium. Evil Does Not Exist was more passive, and I think while Nosferatu displayed more technical ability, I appreciated the way that Evil Does Not Exist placed it in the film more. They're both excellent examples of sound though, and I'll be giving my silver turtle to the gothic horror pre-classic. Alright, apologies for the casual get-up, especially on the makeup video. But I am tired. Getting to the end of this series. We're almost there. Almost there. We're almost there. I'll tell you, I'm pretty excited when this is over. But yeah, I don't know anything about makeup. But I can give you my best Stephen A. Smith impression though, because I'm about to rattle off on this art form as if I know anything about it at all. And to be fair to Stephen A., and to be fair to me, the way he describes himself as a guy that doesn't understand everything about the minutiae of what's going on, but understands the end result. And I think I have the ability to at least do that after the amount of films that I've seen. Of course, I'm not an expert in this field at all, so if anyone knows more than me, please let me know in the comments. Tell me some books to read so I can educate myself more. This is another one of those art forms in film that deserves more attention, and I hope by the end of next year I'll have better equipment to critique these films. But for now, let's just talk about the nominees. A Different Man. Neurofibromatosis, being a real condition, requires a lot of thought in the makeup process, not only to get it realistic, but to portray it in a way that's not a disservice to the community. I think one of the best parts about this film is it's clinically not a disservice to the neurofibromatosis community as far as I'm aware, and that starts with a fundamentally ethical approach to the makeup process. There was no going over the top, no exaggerated features that aren't part of the diagnosis, none of that. I know that sounds like the bare minimum, but come on. This is Hollywood we're talking about. It was also just technically so well done, it never felt like a prosthetic Sebastian Stan was wearing at all. Nosferatu. A lot of these are going to be unbelievable transformations, and of course the main topic of this film here is that Bill Skarsgård looks absolutely unrecognizable as Count Orlok. He looks so clearly decrepit and pathetic, in a good way. It fit what the movie was going for tonally, and a lot of the side characters were really well done too. Bonus points for the mustache. The fact that they included a mustache has to be taken into consideration. Queer. When I saw that this production took a lot from the 40s and 50s, I wasn't just talking about the cinematography and the production design. The makeup was radiant and reflective, giving these stars a shine in the same way that you would expect to see Jimmy Stewart or something like that. It added so much to the love letter of the time, and I think it even enhanced these performances to a certain degree. I have to imagine that as an actor, it becomes easier to transform into a character once you see yourself inside the character's makeup. Good makeup can transform you into a different person, as I believe it was capable of doing here. The Apprentice. I think a lot of what I said about Sebastian Stan's performance can be said in conjunction with what they did in the makeup department here. It's not a silly impression, it's a real interpretation that tries to take itself seriously. Instead of a personality, this feels like a real guy with real thoughts and insecurities. For this film to work, it's tantamount that the makeup is approached correctly, and I think what they did here worked great for what they were going for. The Brutalist. Something I want to discuss with this nomination is that many of these awards contenders are rewarded for the most of something, like the most makeup, the most costumes, the most production design. It's not often enough that we nominate the areas of the industry that are just technically good at what they're doing. And this film here, I feel like, is technically operating on all cylinders. The disheveled nature of the characters and how you see them change throughout time is a critical element of what the makeup's doing, and the way these characters treat themselves says a lot about how they're feeling emotionally. The substance. You know, that being said, many of the films I'm nominating contain a lot of effects. This film is part of that for sure, but be for real, how could this film not get nominated? It was inventive, stylish, pulpy, thematically resonant, offered a lot to say about the characters, and tied the whole film together. For a film that talks about obsession over looks, of course it had to look good, but it really wasn't just the crazy body horror that makes it great. Each scene where it looks like you've jumped into the uncanny valley looks incredibly unrealistic because of the technical ability of the makeup department. I think as far as makeup goes, this was a really great year. Looking back at the nominations, it wasn't just the amount of films with lots of prosthetics, but the way they were used which particularly hit me. Each of these films brought a different style of makeup to the art form, and the diversity was really satisfying to watch. It's a shame only one of these can win, because there's so many films that are deserving. But what can you do? The winner of the Golden Turtle Award goes to... The Substance. It has to be. There's no other film that highlights it more, uses it with so much variety, or utilizes it within the context of the story than this film here. A lot of its visual charm was in its ability to exercise this stuff, and it was incredibly satisfying to watch it deliver. Special shout out to Queer, Nosferatu, and A Different Man. I'm sharing the love today. They can all have a silver turtle. Fashion's not something I've been particularly good at growing up. It's not something I place a lot of importance in, but due to my tangential love of film, it's impossible to deny its impact on the industry. Everybody has fashion whether they like it or not. Everybody holds themselves in a certain way. How you do that can say a lot about you as a person, like where were you born, or when were you born, or how were you raised? It's fun to look at it from a historical perspective, and it's fun to see what looks good. I think for a lot of independent productions, costume design is seen as some luxury you can't afford, but really it's a luxury that you have to afford if you want to make a lasting impression. It's tantamount to cohesion between the characters, and it's important for maintaining the visual style. I wouldn't say a character always has to look good, but if they're gonna dress like shit, it has to look like interesting shit, like the Big Lebowski or something like that. So, the costumes that don't look like shit are challengers. One of the biggest pet peeves I have about costume design awards is that they only nominate costume designs from period pieces. I understand those costumes take more time to put together, but I think we often overlook some really good modern designs that way. My favorite thing about the costume designs in this movie is that they're simple, unextraneous, and casually iconic. I can recognize a lot of their designs right away, and I think it's because the characters are clearly defined within them. Hundreds of beavers. The theme with this film is that they're doing more with less, and guess what? They're doing more with less here. The costumes are probably the greatest example of it though, because they both feel like a $30 onesie you can find on the rack, and synonymous expressions of the film. It's kind of what makes them different from any other film, and because of its comedic roots, these costumes only add to the charm. La Chimera. I think this movie specifically and intentionally places a lot of importance in its clothing. The main character wears the same clothes pretty much throughout the entire runtime to metaphorically showcase the burden he's still holding within him. It's a great thematic touch and also a good look, working well on both levels. Each of the other characters are very individualistic, with well-defined wardrobes and thoughtful designs. Queer. I think on a technical level this film is a masterpiece, whether you're talking about makeup, production, performances, or costume design. It's a cohesive film where all of these fit together oh so brilliantly. What can I say more about this film? I've nominated it so many times. I love the way Daniel Craig looks in that tan suit, It just looks sick as hell. I remember seeing a still a couple months before it came out and thinking, damn, this movie is already a banger before I even saw it. The Brutalist. What do I love about these designs? They were sleek. I mean, this film being entirely centered around brutalism, you'd expect everything to have a pretty uniform style, which it did, but that only enhanced the final picture and gave it the kind of authorial intent that you look for in these kind of films. The substance. Who could forget those 80s exercise jumpsuits? The style in this picture is just so vivid and realized, it's practically jumping off the walls. It's exciting, complimentary, and colorful, everything you'd hope it would be. Also, very fake in some ways, which if you've seen the film, you know how much of a good thing that is. I hope I can get more into fashion, at least enough to not look like a loser at parties. Until then, there's still a lot of work to do. Many of these costumes would also not fit in parties, but I'll tell you, it doesn't mean they're not deserving of a Golden Turtle Award. The winner this year has to be... La Chimera. It was hard to choose this time around, but I had to go with my gut and pick a film that has so much whimsy and so much intent put into its costume design. It felt both real and extraordinary, a line which is incredibly difficult to toe in between. Special shout out to Queer, which contained a technical lightning in a bottle. I think it has something to do with my love of that time and production mixed with their ability to modernize it. I'm also a sucker for color, brightness, and the like. I'm gonna give it a silver turtle. Alright, I saved the heavy hitters for last. These last three, I think if you had to pin it down, are the most important aspects to film, other than maybe the performances, but I had to give you all something so you'd keep watching. Cinematography is such a dynamic art form, there's so many ways to handle it correctly. It makes it so personable and interesting. Like by watching a cinematographer or a director work, you can see how they feel about the world, you can see how they see the world, you can see what they find important. Because of that, it's so easy to talk about a film's cinematography for long periods of time. It's a strange category too, because you're never quite sure how much of it is the cinematographer and how much of it is the director going into the shooting, and it really depends on the film. That necessary collaboration is what gives each film its uniqueness though, and it keeps the industry fresh. Each of these films exemplify an articulate way of seeing the world. They dare us to be more observant and look at things a little differently. Here are the nominees for achievement in cinematography. Wyatt Garfield, A Different Man. A Different Man is an underrated film in a lot of different categories, but its cinematography in particular is important to consider. I think it was great at developing anxiety being the primary emotion throughout the film. It covers it in many different ways, from downright fear to casual stress to feelings of inadequacy. As the film changes directions, the camera work begins to reflect that, and that ability to be many things over the course of the film is what stands out to me. Ranabir Das, All We Imagine Is Light. Like I said in a review of this movie and many times in the past, this film was excellent at displaying the shift in environment from the city to the coastline. After a little bit of time, the handheld cam at the beginning of the film had really started to grow on me, and this work has only gotten better with consideration. It gave the audience a wonderful contextual push, gently moving us to where the movie wanted to go. It was beautiful, but it also didn't take the spotlight more than it had to. It serves the story the way mature cinematography typically does. Jasper Wolf, Baby Girl. I feel like this is worth a nomination just for the focus technique it has alone. For those of you who don't know, there's these textual moments in the film when characters get emotionally elevated, the camera begins to move in and out of focus. It's a subtle technique, but to me, extremely difficult to pull off. It requires precise direction and a patient crew, and I thought it was brilliant at incorporating it into the story. I've never seen a technique quite like that in film before, and I hope it gets stolen once or twice before it gets forgotten. Sayambu Muktipram, Challengers. This is about as good as you could possibly get for dynamic, fast-paced camera work. It was bouncing off the screen with creative movement, inventive concepts, and quirky interruptions that kept the audience engaged and warmed up. It's not like it was one note either, with consistent shifts in style based on where the characters were at. In particular, I think about this scene between Josh O'Connor and Zendaya leaning on a wall and talking. It's such a typical scene, how can you make that look interesting? And yet the camera work puts on an absolute clinic. I've never seen someone do so much with so little movement. Such a classic scene. Greg Fraser, Dune Part 2. When it comes to epic shots, Dune Part 2 has everything that you need. The opening scene where a few grunts fly in the air, how did they make something mundane look so ridiculously cool? For most filmmakers, I implore them to stay in the smaller realm where no idiots can get to you. For Greg Fraser, Please, sir, please never stop making big movies. Even for films I had some issues with, like The Creator, I mean, holy shit, it looked gorgeous. He just gets it, man, and it seems like he's only getting better. Yoshio Kirigawa. Evil does not exist. This is cinematography that focuses so seriously and meticulously on its environment. It allows itself to be bold, taking advantage of long shots and even longer takes to set the scene as it needs to be set. It also makes it so that when a new shot comes into play, it can be truly bold, truly striking. It captures the forest so beautifully. As I said before, there's a scene where the camera is just looking up for trees and minutes at a time, and you get to see the childlike wonder of the forest. You forget to look at things in a way you haven't seen them before because it's just easier to push forward in where you're at. The cinematography is so good here, it reminded me to stop and take a look at my surroundings. Lachlan Milne, exhibiting forgiveness. I've complimented everything around the cinematography in this movie, so of course I'm going to appreciate its main visual feat. This is clean cinematography, crisp cinematography. No fat, no wasted shots or anything like that. Its inserts and atmospheric shots are gorgeous, and they seem to create magic out of ordinary places. Jint Zibelotus, Flow. Flow contains some sweeping shots, epic shots, one takes that set up the scene, and close-ups that gave you all the emotion from these animals you ever wanted. Now I know this is an animated movie, so stuff like this is easier to pull off than a live action. But really at the end of the day, what's important is how it serves the story, which the cinematography very much does. It had the opportunity to not break away often, so that fluidity gave it some good cohesion. Also, if I might add, Jint Zibelotus has been in a lot of these different categories that usually filmmakers spurse off to other people, so the fact that he was able to do all of this virtually by himself is just an incredible feat. Eric Yue, I Saw the TV Glow. The camera work in this film chooses to be hypnotic, like its characters, and show the horror of a failure to self-actualize. It had some great slow zoom-ins, but it also knew when to keep the camera still. As the great Kenny Rogers stated, "You gotta know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run." This film seemed to heed his advice, especially in scenes that felt claustrophobic. Helen LeVar, La Chimera. This film is so quietly beautiful. It wasn't a single shot that hit me, but by the totality of the film, I was completely blown away. There's a lot of technical things that cinematographers are supposed to do, but at the end all that matters is that you're able to capture a feeling, and this film contains so much heart, so much soul. It was like the camera wanted Josh O'Connor to succeed in his self-actualization journey, and every decision it made was an omniscient guide trying to push him in the right direction. Kazuto Izumida, Look Back. This is another one of those films, like Flow, where the medium allows it more freedom to move around with the camera. Unlike Flow though, this movie here has a very, very different style of cinematography. It was far more personal, giving a lot of time to each of the girls' faces and seeing their reactions. It's also not slow or stagnant the way I typically enjoy cinematography, but it was still completely beautiful. Jaron Blashchek, Nosferatu. While many people have had criticisms over Egger's emotional apathy from time to time, which is not unfounded, I think on a technical level he's still one of the best in the business. His shot selection here takes great advantage of the money he has, giving sweeping gothic imagery that almost flies across the screen. He has a clear idea of what the genre is, and instead of trying to do something different, he tries to push the same style forward. It's a wonderful love letter to what came before. Sayambu Muktiprum, Queer. Queer was clearly a reimagining of 50s style production through the modern lens, and you could tell that Luca had a pure love of film from that era by the way he approached the cinematography. Certain establishing shots, like one where you start at the side of the building and pan down to the character on the street, were taken right from that era of film. I just love how uniquely visionary it still manages to be though. It utilized slow-mo in a way that works. That's always fun to see. This is probably Guadagnino's most mature camera work to date. Lowell Crawley, The Brutalist. Dark, vivid, covered in soot, this film seems to hit the jackpot at every moment. You can tell a film's gonna have good cinematography when even the basic stuff, like two characters talking next to each other, is handled as if it had never been filmed before. It took advantage of sweeping imagery, it took advantage of small spaces, indoors, outdoors. It was a truly epic and diverse cinematic experience. Benjamin Kraken, The Substance. What a great name. I love cinematography that's just in your face, unapologetic, rammed down your throat. From the first 5 minutes of this film, you can tell you found yourself in a cinematic ride, one that grips onto you and won't let you go. It used strange and awkward shots, diagonal shots, up close, across the room, whatever it takes to get the right material. It was incredibly French. That's not something I can fully understand as a concept, but it feels that way to me. Striking, bold, certainly exciting. It'd be impossible to leave this film off the list. I think it's fair to say over the last 5 years, the 2020s have turned into a real absurdist or surrealist kick. Which is good for me, that's my favorite kind of art. I'll eat that shit up like a pig on Rainn Wilson's farm. It's been wonderful to talk about this stuff because I think I know things and then someone asks me to explain it and I end up looking like Tom Holland in that one Tom Holland clip.
And I understand Spanish to a certain level.
¿Su nombre?
21.
¿Cuántos años tienes?
But there's a beautiful list of films this year with great cinematography that elevates the films they're working in. But this is certainly one of the most difficult categories I've had to choose from. There's so many great options here. The winner for achievement in cinematography this year is... Sayambu Mutipun, Queer. I think it's gotta be Queer, and for this award, it mostly comes down to personal preference. I love this style of film, I love the way it's shot. I didn't expect the surrealist style to be so successful here. I feel immense gratitude that I got to see it, and I got to see it with a perfect modern reimagining. Special shout out to Evil Does Not Exist. I thought its cinematography was full of heart and absolutely deserving of a silver turtle. Finally, something I feel like I can talk about without seeming like a frickin' wanker. I love to write. I used to do it a lot more before this YouTube thing, and I hope it's something I can end up doing in my career. I'm incredibly invested in how a story operates, what makes it good, how you approach a thing. Even writing scripts for these videos is enjoyable, even though they make my head throb all the time. Also, writing gives me deep shame and makes me hate myself. But that's healthy. That means I'm expressing my feelings in the right way instead of drinking them down the toilet. But writing is a naturally empathetic art form. It requires looking into a possibly fictional character's soul, seeing what's inside, and that activity is very satisfying to watch or to read or to write. Good writing can help you understand the world better, it can help you get over immense tragedy, or it can help you speak out when you see some sort of injustice. So much of the social change over the last hundreds of years has come from writing and pushing the brain forward. Many people like to joke that these are just movies and they don't have any impact. I just don't see it that way. I think the media that we consume is more important now than ever before. It's vital to our lives and it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. These stories, in their own little way, have pushed the world in a better direction and shown me a better way of living my life. Here are the nominees for achievement in writing for a motion picture. Pael Kapadia, All We Imagine Is Light. The way that they characterize these three women as such unique characters in their own right, but at the same time unifying them into one major story that talks about the systemic issues that come within living as a woman in India, that was incredibly powerful to me. Also, in the beginning of the film, the writer takes about 3 or 4 minutes of dialogue just to show all the different kinds of people that congregate in the city, what the city means to them, how they look at the area. It's just poetry. When the characters leave Mumbai, you get the same kind of soliloquy. It almost feels like the ending of the movie. But it's personal, I think, because the last act separates you and it changes the dynamic of the story completely. Helena Rain, Baby Girl. I don't think any film this year has handled a two-character dynamic better than this movie. It brilliantly shows the complexity of all these crises because you have themes of sexual awakening, feminism, and inappropriate power dynamics all rolled into one. How do you juggle all these things? How do you even approach a story like this? And yet it perfectly encapsulates how difficult these issues can be in real life. It doesn't isolate a single thing. It shows how all of these different concerns can impact you all the time. I don't know about y'all, but I've got about 3 to 4 different crises every day that impact my life. It's not just one. Everything weighs me down. So a film that can acknowledge that and handle that story beautifully, that has some serious power to it. Not to mention Harris Dickinson's character. I think it's one of the most interesting characters ever put to screen. He's really, really intriguing. Justin Kuritsky's Challengers. What I like most about Challengers is how tight it is, how technically perfect the story is. There's absolutely no fat, it builds so easily, it's so emotionally vulnerable. I actually can't pinpoint a single flaw in this story, and that rarely happens even among the best scripts. To have the structure play out as a tennis match is such a perfect decision. I think as many storytellers know, tennis is such a great sport for art in general because it's personal, strategic, and emotional. These three characters blend together so easily, and the story of sexual awakening feels like it comes to a natural conclusion. This is one deserving of study. Denis Villeneuve, John Spates, and Frank Herbert. Dune Part 2. I remember exactly where I was when I watched the first Dune movie. It was just a few years before that I had read the original, and I was so excited to see it on screen. I thought that movie was good. It was really good in some ways, but it wasn't the perfect adaptation I was hoping it would be. I knew though, because I had read the book, that the entire story relies on the second part. You basically get about 300 pages in before you even know what's happening fully. I was so blown away by the adaptation of this second half. I thought it was a perfect encapsulation of what a modern retelling can do for a story, and I thought this movie was an improvement over the original work. It reminded me of Little Woman actually, in that it adapted the material with so much reverence, but it also reformulated it to enhance the spirit of what it was going for. Chani in particular, Zendaya's character, was so much better in this film than she was in the book. She had narrative weight, and it wasn't just like she was standing there. Her incorporation made Paul's journey that much stronger, and it uplifted the rest of the story. Ryusuke Hamaguchi and Aiko Ishibashi. Evil does not exist. Oh man, what a masterful screenplay. It knows exactly how much to give in a certain scene and when, operating between minutes of silence and strings of extended dialogue. Conversationally, Hamaguchi I think is one of the best to ever do it. Writing characters with such natural intelligence, you can sit and hear them talk for 3 hours at a time. They casually bring up philosophy that could shake your entire worldview and leave you silent on the trip back from the theater. I think he's probably my favorite filmmaker working today. He's just operating on a level that changes me so personally. The only issue I have, and one that I'm not even sure is an issue, is that maybe the ending was a little abrupt. Metaphorically, it's incredibly rich and powerful, and ties the film in a bow. Literally speaking, I'm not as sure. How much that matters to you probably defines how you saw this movie. Jin Sibilotis, Matisse Kaza, and Ron Diens. Flow. For this film to offer so much introspection without a single line of dialogue is monumental. But forget gimmicky half awards. Between all other films, it's one of the technically best written out there. Each character is perfectly realized with incredible personal journeys and under-the-surface adventures. You could spend hours breaking down each interaction, and you'd still find more coming back to it again. It had the privilege of stumping me on a metaphor, something I'm still peeved about, but like the late great David Lynch would say, it's about the emotional reception. As someone who loves animals and loves to study animals, this film had a personal connection to me, and it's one I could probably watch 20 times over again. Jane Schoenbrunn, I Saw the TV Glow. Can you imagine watching this movie and not knowing it's about the trans experience? I got to it a little late, so I saw the online discussion about this one and I found myself asking, I wonder how subtle the imagery is. Turns out it would take an idiot not to understand what the film is going for. That being said, it's one of the best written scripts I've ever seen, and it has some universal things that I think hit my generation particularly hard, even if you aren't trans. Getting lost in media and living through something else while forgetting about your own self-actualization is something that's incredibly personal to me, something that I struggle with as a film fan, and I've never seen a film tackle this kind of issue before. It was hypnotic, awkward, and incredibly poignant. I can't believe how much this film had to offer thematically, and I'm positive we'll have a series of movies over the next 5 years directly stealing from its concepts. Alice Rohrwacher, Carmela Covino, and Marco Pedinello. La Chimera. Love, loss, admiration, how do you interact with the beauty of the past? This film was such a beautiful meditation on trying to discover how we live our lives. It's like a coming-of-age story for 30-year-olds, when you really get a taste of what life is and you begin to doubt everything you thought you knew. It's existential, but it offers heartwarming answers that comfort you when you need it. It's a loving antithesis to nihilism, and a possible antidote if you find yourself falling into a deep state of depression. It's an incredible and whimsical journey. Kiyotaka Oshiyama and Tatsuki Fujimoto. Look Back. First of all, I love a film that's not afraid to come in at only an hour of runtime. Stories are stories, they're not supposed to be set to a certain length of time, they're supposed to go as long as the narrative requires. And in this film, it only took an hour to have me crying on my couch. The journey between these two young women was expertly explored, and so their connection felt so personal. What really caught me though was how Fujimoto tackled artistic obsession, how you can get tied to your art in an unhealthy degree, how it affects your ego, and the minutiae of what making art looks like. Megan Park, My Old Ass. This is a film I haven't nominated so much over the course of this award season because I think the technicals are good, but maybe not quite award-worthy. The writing though, and in particular the dialogue, was some of the greatest stuff I've seen this entire year. The film centers around a young woman talking with a future version of herself, and that's a very difficult thing to pull off, but the way Megan Park does it is just wonderful to see unfold. It's gentle and introspective, the conversation always goes in an interesting direction, the conflicts always add complications, there's never easy solutions, and by the end of it, man, I've gotta admit, I was just a sobbing mess. I think it's easily the best coming-of-age film of the year, and one I can take a lot from even as someone in their mid-20s. Justin Kuritsky's and William S. Burroughs. Queer. Queer was an excellent character study, and it was excellent at dissecting the wills of their two main characters and how their sexuality impacted their lives. It was conversationally brilliant, but it also looked at Craig's life with a sense of reverence and love that I really appreciated. His addiction was ever present, and his decision-making always had a sense of dread in him, as if he was fighting to want to be alive. It's a story like Baby Girl that doesn't have a simple question to ask, but more paints a complicated situation and asks how the audience feels about it. The age difference is a major factor, and yet you wonder how much of a factor it is considering the situation here. The only issue you may have with it is the third act. It's one that may feel a little abrupt and incohesive with the first two, but because it was so thematically rich, it really didn't bother me much. Brady Corbet and Mona Fastfold, The Brutalist. A movie like this, a 3.5-hour epic with the sense of detail and emotional prowess it had, marked an incredible achievement in cinematic storytelling. It flipped a typical immigrant success story on its head, showing the manhandling and economic issues that come from fleeing to this country. Adrien Brody's character was a perfect allegory for someone who sticks to their guns and tries to create something even if that thing has become bastardized, fallen off its original meaning, and no longer resonates with your life story. To handle the impact of 20 years of life, it requires this length of time to really paint the picture of what Brody's character was going through. It was brilliant all but one section possibly. There was a particularly abrupt scene that I think could have been reworked a little bit, but all in all, one of the great stories of this decade, absolutely. Man, after talking about all these movies, I've fallen in love with them all over again. It's terrible, I can't believe I have to pick one. In my head, I've narrowed it down to 5, which is terrible because that's how many I'm supposed to nominate. I'll tell you ahead, there's going to be a lot of silver turtles handed out. But yeah, I guess the winner's gotta be... Jane Schoenbrunn, I Saw the TV Glow. Fuck, man, this was such a hard decision. This whole award show is stupid anyway. But yeah, I think the impact of this film will be seen for a long time to come. It's just so poignant, it's impossible to deny it. It's an ingenious look at an issue that I think will only become more prevalent as time goes on. Special shout out to Challengers, All We Imagine Is Light, Flow, and Dune Part 2 for being such remarkable scripts in their own right. Truly, all of them are deserving of a Golden Turtle Award, but if I start giving out 5 of those, then it's going to lose all of its meaning. They can all have the Silver Turtle. And you know what? Fuck it. La Chimera can have one too. Directing is such a fascinating job to look through and discuss because it's both the most important job in all of filmmaking and the hardest to decipher what it actually is on screen. It has so much variety in what the person can bring. It's like either the most important stylistic element in the film or it's just a service member for the head writer or the lead star. The way I like to break it down is using a scientific term, particularly the way people look at biology. The first way to look at biology is called reductionist biology, in which a person looks through the parts of a system like the cell or the organ or organelles or the full body. You look at each individual part and you try to decipher what that part does specifically. That's kind of what I'm doing with this award show. I'm breaking film down to each individual part and seeing what it does well. It's very specific. The second form of biology is called systems biology, and I think it's this way that we look at film that is entirely the responsibility of the director. Systems doesn't look at the specifics of a given part all that much, but it looks at how all of these parts flow together and what kind of unit they create. Every little piece of film, from the writing lighting, to the costumes, to the set design, are a little bit the responsibility of that person in charge, and a little the responsibility of the director to make sure it's all working together. They are the arbiters of tone, in charge of cohesion and the overall product. Directors can make a bad idea good, or they can take a good idea and just throw it in the bin. They have to be great leaders, listeners, and wonderful artists. All of the films on my list here exemplify these traits and prove what a good director can do for its source material. This list will probably be quite similar to my Best Picture video. With that being said, here are the nominees for Achievement in Direction. Aaron Schimberg, A Different Man. I think, without spoiling anything, there's a big shift that takes place in the middle of this story, and that's something that can be difficult to work around tonally, and something that you always have to have your finger to the pulse on during the making of this movie. Schimberg did a marvelous job of making that transition, while still having the film operate under the same anxiety. I hope this film doesn't get overlooked as time goes on. Pael Kapadia, All We Imagine Is Light. This film is actually very similar to A Different Man in that the director had to manage a very large shift in the middle of the movie. In Kapadia's case though, she was able to radically change the atmosphere while still keeping the core of the film intact, and that comes from an incredible knowledge of the character she was portraying. By the end of the film, I was floored with her ability. Helena Rain, Baby Girl. I love the approach Helena Rain took to this story because, while it's probably among the more subtle directions on this list, it took some very unique steps into making the story her own. New York is always a very sober, realistic, dialogue-heavy area, so I expected that to be in the film, and it was. I hate the Adam McKay-style handhold cam stuff that's been so influential in the area as of recently though, so I'm glad that Rain switched it up and used something more still and controlled. Luca Guadagnino, Challengers. Sometimes it's hard to give a film built in such a realistic world a lot of personality, but Guadagnino was able to do that while still keeping the characters grounded on 2 feet. While many people like to compliment the film by saying it's way ahead of its time, funny enough, I would claim this as a brilliant movie that reminds me of the way films were made 8 to 10 years ago. It's got a killer score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, a sober, fast-paced style, and some PG-13 level sexiness. It reminded me of the film I watched growing up with a more mature and modern lens. It really opened up what he was capable of tonally. Denis Villeneuve, Dune Part 2. Villeneuve has made his name as a superstar director for a while now, but as time goes on his films just keep getting better and better. His improvement on getting the best performances, set design, lighting, color correction, this is probably the most complete work of his that I've seen since Prisoners. It's a monumental achievement and it marks just how comfortable he's gotten with the budget size he's been given. I hope, like Nolan, he continues to make films of this scale because there aren't many notable directors that have the ability to operate in this atmosphere anymore. Ryusuke Hamaguchi, Evil Does Not Exist. I've only recently done a deep dive on this guy's filmography, and I just found out that the film that got him into international recognition was a 5-hour road trip movie about a group of middle-aged women taking a trip to Kobe. Doesn't that sound like the greatest thing you've ever heard? But yeah, I just mean to say that this director is one that's not afraid to take big swings, and that boldness comes across as an unabashed quality in his work. He's one of the most observant directors I've ever seen. Titus Kaphar, Exhibiting Forgiveness. Titus Kaphar is a beautiful mind that has such a singular vision when it comes to his film. He, like Luca, takes seemingly mundane atmospheres and from that creates an immaculate picture. It's like the world moves slowly for him and he's able to see more of it than any of us laymen's can imagine. I hope he continues with film. I know he's got other things to work on. Jins Zibalotis, Flow. It's very rare for an animated film in America to be shown with great direction and singular vision, so when I see it on screen I still get a little surprised that it can be done. Zibalotis was great at using long and wide shots to show the scale of the production, but also to keep in mind the existential nature of the story. The animation style was wonderful, and it was one that I could look at for hours on end. Seriously, the world building was off the charts. Jane Schoenbrunn, I Saw the TV Glow. So many of the elements in the show were casually breathtaking. The lighting, camera work, attention to detail, performances, it was all such a momentous product. Schoenbrunn clearly put her all into this production, and it's tonally one of the most complete products of the entire year. Alice Rohrwacher, La Chimera. This is one of the smaller films that I feel so lucky to have caught up on. It was probably the most beautiful film of the year when you put together the imagery with the messaging and the performances. It knew when to be subtle, it knew when not to be subtle, and it was engaging the whole way through. It's one of those movies where you don't realize the level at which it hits you until a week or two down the line. It also manages to tell such a wonderful story while feeling like real people going through real things. That's authenticity that's hard to replicate. Kiyotaka Oshiyama, Look Back. Recent anime has a history of being flashy to the point of it being a distraction, but this film was able to use that style into a way that incorporates it brilliantly into the story. The camera movement does justice to Fujimoto's original work and adds a little extra flavor that Oshiyama was looking for. The color, lighting, blocking, all of these complemented the movie perfectly. Luca Guadagnino, Queer. With this year, Luca is probably as hot a name as you can possibly get in the smaller movie market. His direction of this film fires on all cylinders, and you can tell that he put real effort into every fraction of this production. The way it was shot, organized, and put into screen actually marks a change in Guadagnino's filmography. He never dipped his toes into surrealism to this degree, and the change fits him very well. I hope he ends up pushing himself further in this direction, because it's where his drama tends to shine. Ali Abbasi, The Apprentice. Having this movie come from an Iranian director is probably the best decision the producers could have made, because for one, Abbasi probably has a lot of knowledge of the American Empire considering Iran's been tormented by it for a while, but also because it has someone tell the story who's from the outside of the day-to-day political slog that comes from Trump. He gave this film both a darkness that eats at you and an empathy to the characters that also eats at you. He had a commanding presence to the film, and I was so impressed with his vision. Brady Corbet, The Brutalist. Man, this film has been nominated so many times, I'm running out of things to say about it. I think the biggest thing has to be the way in which Corbet was able to pull off the scale of the film. There truly wasn't too many sweeping camera angles or big budget expenditures, but by utilizing an incredible musical score, certain camera tricks, and excellent writing, that makes the life of this man feel weighty. He managed to create something truly special. Coralie Farge, The Substance. In this film, Farge crafted a unique story, one that will leave a lasting impact on genre filmmaking, and one that takes a B-movie feel and turns it into A-plus cinema. Farge was incredibly creative with her shot selection, the visual design of the film was completely her own, and it just feels like a film that could never be replicated. For that, she has to receive a nomination. This is probably the most difficult category to talk about because I don't want to rehash everything that I've already talked about before, and at the same time I don't want to get too specific because I have the Best Picture video coming out tomorrow. I think the way I'll fix it is by putting this category first next year. That way I can set the tone for the whole series, and then maybe when I get to the more specific categories I can get into the specifics. Oh well. Hindsight is 20/20. I still think it's a great list of directors this year, and it's impossible to choose just one. But I will, damn it. I have a duty to the 8 of you who might watch this, and I have to give it my best shot. And so the winner for Achievement in Direction in 2024 is... Alice Rohrwacher, La Chimera. I've just fallen in love with her style. She does so much while still feeling like I'm looking at real people. I haven't seen her other work before, so there's nothing like running into a new artist that you can fall in love with. The same exact thing happened to me this year with Jane Schoenbrunn of I Saw the TV Glow. I think that one's deserving of a silver turtle as well. But that is going to do it for me for all of these specific categories. I'm going to have a drink or 2 or 3, and then I'm going to, get back to work because there's still more work to be done. But I am so excited to be done with this. I'm so excited to stop talking about this movies. I'm excited to get on to the new year, try some new projects out, try to see where I want this channel to go. I don't have a full idea, but I have some concepts of things I want to try. And then this break over February that I'm creating for myself will do good for my creative impulses to see, I'll have some time to actually see what I want to do up next. But there'll still be movie reviews. It'll always be movie reviews, at least for the time being. I guess always is not the right word, but yeah, maybe some more specific stuff, some offhand videos, maybe some better production value. I'm going to try at least. All right, it's been a long journey, My favorite films of the year. I'm so excited about this because I'm so tired of talking about these movies. I'm sure you're tired of listening to me talk about these movies. But this is it. We just gotta get through this one video. The difference between this one and the other categories I've been working on so far is that for this one, I'll be ranking each member of the list according to favoritism. For everything else, I've been taking my personal taste into account for sure, but I've also tried to objectively analyze each element as much as I can. Here, I feel more freedom to just go off of what impacted me the most personally, how I was emotionally affected, stuff like that. Because really, so much of your love of film depends on who you watch it with, how you're feeling at the time, what's going on to you that day. I think that's one of the best parts of film is that personal element. Otherwise, it's just science, which is so famously useless. But please enjoy this list, and if you have any problems with it, eat a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. And if you want to put up your favorite movies of the year, that would be awesome as well. I love to see what kinds of film impact other people and how they express themselves. I love talking about this stuff, and finding just a few people to share this blessing with has been really, really nice. With that being said, here are my top 25 films of the year, coincidentally the nominees for the Best Picture prize. I'll start with a few honorable mentions. Y2K. This is the funniest movie of 2024. It's an underrated blast that left me rolling in the theater. It had some hilarious supporting performances, and it played against the coming-of-age genre with an air of reverence instead of that tired, ironic spin. I may have had some issues with the technicals that made it difficult to include it in the main list, but as far as party films go, I think it's a certified hit. Dee Dee. What I loved about this story was that it wasn't afraid to portray its main character as unlikable at times, because, let's be honest, we're all pretty unlikable as children from time to time. A film that accepts that about the world opens the door from a writing standpoint to explore deeper connections and walk through complicated relationship dynamics. The storyline between the main kid and his mother was especially moving. Kneecap. Language as a means for revolution is a great way to contextualize a people and their struggle, showing the damage Britain has done in a post-Troubles landscape. These characters work like firecrackers, their energy frantic and bubbling. Most importantly, the film allows them to be as angry as they should be, given the circumstances of Northern Ireland. All love to Michael Fassbender as well. The harsh reality of indie film is that you need a star to draw attention, and him showing up for the 10 minutes he does allows this film to be seen by a wider audience. The Room Next Door. It's impossible for Pedro Almodovar to make a bad movie, I think, just by the nature of his observations. He develops a world that's so authentic to him, I can't help but admire his vision, even if this isn't one of my favorites. It has two great performances by two of the great actresses working today as well, so for that alone, it demands your attention. Trap. This is a kind of lightning-in-a-bottle film where the right actor found the right director at the right time. Josh Hartnett works perfectly within the world of M. Night Shyamalan, and he creates a character you can't take your eyes off of. It's a great thriller if you're looking for a good time, one you can enjoy after a long day's work. I'll admit that I'm partial toward Shyamalan. I became a film fan during his death stretch, and I never could have imagined a director coming back from that. Nowadays, I think it's best to defend our auteurs, even if they're not the most critically successful. A Better Man. I mean, the man is a monkey. Literally, I cannot think of a better idea. Robbie Williams? Who gives a shit? You make him a monkey. Well, that's a whole nother story entirely. Saturday Night. As a fan of the show growing up, and as someone with a reverence for its impact on the overall comedy landscape, I came into this film hoping to appreciate it. I enjoyed the fast-paced editing, the lovable performances, and the high-tension storytelling. It's a good decision to set the story when they did. I think it's possible they took the whole thing a little too seriously, though. Megalopolis. I actually thought this film was terrible. Atrocious, really. I thought I would enjoy it more in an ironic way, but I couldn't even bring myself to that. I love so much that it exists though, just the fact that it's real is enough for it to be here. Not every film has to be good to have a positive impact, and the way the film-watching world took hold of this movie and let it fly was such a blast to be a part of. But yeah, it's truly awful, just astonishingly bad. Worse than you even think it is. Now that we've had a few appetizers, it's on to the main course. I'm not sure if these are the best films of the year, but they are my favorites. These are films that changed me in some way, shape, or form, and helped me develop a more specific perspective on the world. Now we'll actually start with the nominees. Number 25. I'm still here. I had been going into the film expecting it to be about a singular performance, but I was pleasantly surprised to see how fleshed out the family dynamic was here. Each performance and character were interesting in their own right, and the film never over-dramatized certain scenarios, which made them more interesting. Fernando Torres was the best part of it, and the film has a natural advantage of taking place on the beaches of Rio de Janeiro, so of course it was beautiful. I do wish the film took more advantage of its wonderful landscape though, and there were times where I was hoping they would take a stronger stance on the situation going on. For those reasons, I can't put it higher on the list, but as an emotionally powerful family drama, it does its job more than well. Number 24. A Real Pain. When people think of this film, the attention of it pretty much goes in the direction of Kieran Culkin's character. I think that's an apt description, and while I didn't think the film was revolutionary by any technical standards, its ability to quantify this character dynamic so beautifully is what forces it onto the list. Culkin's character forced me to look inward and to wonder whether I'm doing enough to put the world in check in my day-to-day life, and the struggle to find that balance is a gorgeous question to ask. He plays a person you admire as much as pity, but I wonder if living that way is the correct way to live, and I've just been doing it wrong this whole time. It's not just his performance, it's the writing of his character, and whenever I think about how much I check myself, I'll be thinking back to this film. Number 23. Honora. I'm not sure this is my favorite Sean Baker film, that would probably be Tangerine, but I can't deny he's got a fascinating eye for characters and he'll be around the block for quite a while. I love how much empathy he extends to his characters and how developed the world around his film is. You never know what direction he's going to take, and that makes him an exciting storyteller. Mikey Madison's obviously great here, and everything she does is brought in with incredible energy. I can't say I think about this movie as much as I was hoping I would be, but there are still many aspects of it that I enjoy. Particularly the performances. Number 22. Hundreds of Beavers. As a huge fan of the silence era of storytelling, I have a great reverence for any film that treats the era with great reverence as well. The way this film plays with such creativity in the medium is a testament to the magic of filmmaking in that there are so many visual tricks going on you wonder how they were able to pull it all off. The area was beautiful and the way they utilized spacing in the landscape were next to none. As far as visuals go, it's difficult for me to claim this year any film was better than it. The only reason it's lower on the list is that the story didn't do anything too special, and I wish it would have been socially a little more progressive. I know it's an homage to the era, but there are some elements you could update a little bit. It's still an incredible experience though, and absolutely worth checking out. Number 21. Monkey Man. Even though it's a simple story, I don't necessarily think that makes it a bad one. In fact, I think it's perfect for what it's going for. Obviously, the action in this movie is just leagues ahead of what's been coming out nowadays, and its ability to continue for such a long amount of time while engaging its audience is a feat among itself. But beyond that, the thematic messaging it brings to the table, along with direction the story takes, makes it an alluring look at classism throughout the world, something which most action movies won't dare touch. Dev Patel's physical commitment to the character and the visuals doesn't go unnoticed. It makes me incredibly excited to see his next directorial effort. Number 20. The Apprentice. The character dynamic between Trump and Roy Cohn is explored in a way with more depth and sincerity than I ever thought possible in a biopic like this, and the performance of both Jeremy Strong and Sebastian Stan were among the most resonant of the entire year. The visual tone of the film gave my stomach a twist, and it encapsulated the inherent cruelty of American business practices with an attuned understanding. There are certain elements that hinder it though, specifically the structure of the story adhering too closely to basic biopic plotlines that dull the original message. Despite that, it's still one of the most telling projects to chronicle the current political landscape, and its direction is next to none. Number 19. The Substance. The Substance was a vivid, pulse-pounding B-movie with its foot on the gas, containing brilliant performances by both Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, respectively. Its messaging was powerful enough to shift the cultural zeitgeist, and while I'm not sure if it had the intellectually poignant approach that some people thought it had, it's clearly what turned this film from a blast to something stronger. The technical aspects like the makeup and costume design are already iconic, and it was able to show off a visual style that can't help but be applauded. Now, there's a very real possibility that this film should be higher up on my list, but I have to be upfront. When I watched this movie, I was very intoxicated, and I watched it at 2 a.m. I didn't finish it at 2 a.m. I started it at 2 a.m. The movie deserves more, but I was in such a hurry to catch up with the other films that I didn't have time to go back and see one I've already seen. That just speaks to the nature of this list though. We come to these stories at different parts in our lives. The film is both the film and what we bring to it. That night, what I brought to the substance was 7 shots of Jameson. I'd love to check it out with a more sober mentality. Number 18. Nosferatu. When I think of Nosferatu, there's a few elements that almost immediately come to mind. The sound design, the makeup, Bill Skarsgård, Lily Rose Depp, and the feminist twist on the story. Each of these are among the most excellent examples in their respective areas in the given year, and they're certainly what I take with me. There are so many technical things the film pulls off as well, and the way Eggers pulls off these effects should be a textbook for many aspiring filmmakers. There are some parts to the writing I felt could have been stronger, but the way Lily Rose Depp's character was approached and executed gives the film a layer that cannot be overstated. She turns the film from really good to can't miss. Number 17. My Old Ass. When I watched this movie, I had just returned from living in Korea for 6 months, and many of the questions I had postponed in my life had been thrown back in my face like a pot of boiling water. I was in a crisis, as you all would expect, because a 25-year-old doesn't just make a YouTube channel unless they're in some sort of crisis. Even though the film's about a teenage girl moving on to college, it faced a lot of similar questions that I had been asking myself for the last couple of days. How do I live in a way that makes my future self proud? What's my duty to my family and to myself? The movie didn't exactly solve these problems for me, but it offered me comfort in that I felt I wasn't alone. I cried at the end of this movie really hard. I'm almost glad I didn't go with anyone because I have difficulty showing my emotions in front of other people. Number 16. Baby Girl. Nicole Kidman's one of my favorite performers. I think she brings a dynamic to a film that can't be replicated by anyone else. It sets the tone for this movie brilliantly, and while there's many things about this story I enjoy, at the end of the day, the dynamic between her and Harris Dickinson is what I'm gonna take with me. These characters had a chemistry that I might claim is the best of the year because I feel like I could watch this film 100 times and still come up with different discoveries about their interactions. Antonio Banderas was also an underrated support. A particular scene with the 3 of these guys together has got to be one of my favorites of the year. It's one I'll come back to for character writing. Number 15. Sing Sing. Coleman Domingo has always been one of my favorite actors, ever since I saw him in Zola a few years ago. Man, what a career he's taken though, and I'm so glad he's receiving the respect he deserves. It's this film though, and his performance that take the cake as far as his filmography is concerned. He's just on another level here. I think in many pieces of media about prisoners, they water down the character's struggle to their confinement, whereas this film treats these people with a humanity that's not typically afforded. The cinematography was wonderful at exploring the existential nature of their lives, and it's got a genuine curiosity that struck me. The choice to use people from the actual program they were trying to depict gave the whole story an added layer of authenticity as well. Number 14. Exhibiting Forgiveness. Remember what I said about Michael Fassbender showing up for Kneecap? Well, when you look at the way this film was received, I imagine if it contained a box office draw, the world would have been treating it very differently. There are so many technical aspects here that I respect, but also from a writing standpoint, it's one of the best at exploring character dynamics as well. Family drama is one of my favorite genres to explore because it feels like such a meaty and epic source that can span years of conflict. Each relationship is approached with enormous care, and the performances carry such emotional weight I feel like it's impossible to come away from this film empty-handed. It's got something for everyone, whichever facet of film you enjoy. I guess it doesn't have a lot of comedy though, so if you're looking for that, you might be in the wrong spot. Number 13. The Seed of the Sacred Fig. I was lucky enough to have an Iranian professor for one of my creative writing classes in college who often took time to talk about the current events going on over there. While there's so much I don't know about the hijab protests, it was wonderful to come into this movie with some amount of background knowledge in mind, and it reminded me of fond memories in the classroom. Iranian cinema is among my favorite, if not my absolute favorite in the cinematic ecosystem, with so many great stories over the last 20 years especially. This film was great at exploring how feminism pushes against the bounds of the government and how scary it can be to enact change within your own family. The story never feels like it moves in an artificial progression, and the ending of it is where it's at its strongest. Number 12. Evil Does Not Exist. The first film I saw of Ryusuke Hamaguchi, and the only film I've seen of his up to Evil Does Not Exist, is called Drive My Car, a movie that came out just a few years ago. That movie is probably in my top 5 of all time. It's a film that contains more depth every time I watch it. It's a film that's brilliant on so many levels I want to puke. To see him follow it up is something I can be safe to say I was very excited for. What I love about this film is how radically different it is from the previous, where Drive My Car was this epic 3-hour affair. Evil Does Not Exist is a much smaller, streamlined production. Its direction gave Hamaguchi ample creative fluency, and while you can still see many of the same tendencies, it's a refreshing story that tells me he still has more to say. I may not have enjoyed this movie as much as Drive My Car, but I can't claim it's any worse than. I'm also curious to see directors experimenting with higher frame rates. I'll have to keep a note of that in the future. Number 11. A Different Man. Sebastian Stan is having one hell of a year, man. From where I thought his talent level was to where I see it now is probably the biggest difference in ability I've seen in a long time. The filming techniques are off the charts good, and the conflict kind of subverts the expectations of the typical different than storyline in a way that better encapsulates the issue. It's also hilarious, much more looking back at the film than it was while I was watching it. Sometimes a film is grainy in a way that feels like a tack-on, but here it gave a great addition to the final product. The cinematography was a bit of an ode to 70s era filmography, which happens to be my favorite era of film. Adam Pearson was also beloved in the role he had, his character being a perfect foil for Sebastian Stan. Number 10. Look Back. It was probably a year or two ago by now when I really dug into Fujimoto's work with Chainsaw Man, and I was shocked by how savvy, intelligent, and emotional his storytelling capabilities were. I had originally roped it together with Jujutsu Kaisen as the new wave of shonen manga, and because of my slight disappointment in that one, in my head I'd given Chainsaw Man the same ceiling. It wasn't until I got through part 1 when I realized I was reading one of my favorite mangas of all time, albeit from a basic manga fan. That's all to mention my expectations were blown away once by him, so it's even more surprising to get them blown away again. It's a small story, but at the same time it has the emotional power of a far grander tale. The way it interweaves with the real-life tragedy of the Kyoto animation arson attack is a perfect memorial to the devastation it caused, where something like this could so easily be disrespectful if handled improperly. Number 9. The Brutalist. This movie, I had thought, was going to end up much higher on my list, but it just went through controversy after controversy that I just found difficult to avoid. There's something to be said about sticking to your guns, but at the same time, there are many legitimate points brought up against this film that are difficult to deny. The AI thing is particularly heartbreaking, especially with how little it's used in the film. It's become clear through research it had a very small impact on it, but at the same time, what kind of precedent would that create to give it a pass? Also, it royally pissed me off that I'd basically finished making everything about this award series before I knew that about the film. I mean, what the hell? So much of the show would have been different, possibly. To tell you the truth, it's hard to know what to do with this film. My original feelings were passionately positive. It does many things brilliantly well. And the historical epic is probably my favorite genre of storytelling, bar none, so it's like I was manufactured to like this movie. Probably, as time goes on, I'll look at it with less favor. For now, I'll leave it at 9. Number 8. All We Imagine Is Light. All We Imagine Is Light is a film that stuck with me more than I expected it to, and it's the film that's probably risen on my list the furthest as time has gone on. I'm seriously impressed with the story structure. It's like an onion, you know, because it has layers. The 3 leading women are all pivotal, bringing an intriguing dynamic with great quiet chemistry. I've also not seen a film in so long that places as much heart into the setting, and its foundation oozes into the characters in a way that makes me so jealous of its talents. Pael Kapadia's only made one other film up to this point, a documentary it looks like, called A Night of Knowing Nothing. Her other work should be more than worth checking out. Number 7. Nickel Boys. I watched this movie late into making this video, so there's some recency bias to consider, but I'm highly confident this will be a film that ages with grace over the next 10 years or so. It's entirely shot in the first person, as many people already know, so I thought I had a grip on the kind of style they were going for. I'm not opposed to gimmicks. I actually think they're a crucial element in pushing the boundaries of what film can accomplish. The experimentation can excite me, even though it still relies on execution. To claim this film as a gimmick, though, feels disingenuous to what it ended up being. It was breathtaking at capturing memory, the fogginess in which you experience it, and the complicated relationship your mind has to it. The nostalgia, the trauma, the sensory overload. Specifically the sensory overload. When you remember something, it feels like you mostly pick up on how you felt at the time. It's not what happened, it's your reaction to what happened. My original thought when this finished was that it had the immaculate cinematography of a modern Terrence Malick, but this film actually had a strong story to be compatible with it. In a way, this movie made me appreciate more what Malick was attempting to do, which is funny, I guess. Number 6. La Chimera. Loving Josh O'Connor feels like such an easy thing to do, especially when he picks such great projects to be a part of. I also get jealous when people just start speaking a different language as if they're nearly fluent. Like, damn, I didn't realize how far behind I was. Especially Italian. Italian is such a sick-ass language. But on a more serious note, I think this is one of the most heartwarming, gentle, and intelligent movies I've ever seen. It finds a way of digging to the bone of issues like many European cultures are capable of, specifically how to love. It's romantic in all the right ways, and it presents the story so that you feel like you've only just peeked into these characters' lives. It's immensely creative in a way that doesn't feel like it comes about by budget constraints, but more like an attachment to a childlike way of gripping the world. It acknowledges the natural state of the suffering mind without succumbing to it. I also enjoy its relationship to grave digging and attaching these existential issues into archaeological concepts. It's a unique window for exploring the questions they have to ask. Number 5. Dune Part 2. As a lover of sci-fi, and as someone who was raised by genre filmmaking, I have a particular knack for any film that does it well. Dune 2 doesn't just do it well, though, does it? It reaches an exclusively rare club of big-budget fanfares with deep literary merit, in a way that has you believe in the power of cinema itself. I mean, this is the best sci-fi film in the last 7 years, easily. Its only competition being yet another one of Denis Villeneuve's films. It's a timely story that chronicles the rise of fascism within our country, America I guess, my country, and it does so with brilliant expertise and modern reimagining. To tell you the truth, I'm shocked this movie isn't higher on my list, and if you caught me on a different day, it's probably as high as my number 1 film. It's covered in worthy performances and visual effects that aren't just cool, but scratch a different itch in your brain like when you're peering at art in an art museum. Without this film, I feel like this year would have been critically bad for mainstream cinema. Film fans are getting to a point where faith in what Hollywood can offer is at an all-time low, and without something like this, I can't imagine where we'd be. Number 4. I Saw the TV Glow. Films like this are why I'm sure the Oscars are a political award instead of an outright champion of cinema. They're preferential to longer-standing careers, and within the singular effort, they like to award lifetime achievements as well. I get that. I honestly do. Because of that, though, they're never going to award the films currently shaping the landscape of cinema, as is the case for I Saw the TV Glow. Never in my life have I seen a film so accurately describe the current landscape's consumption of media, how it relates to their sexual growth, and how isolating the world can feel. Not to mention the technical masterclass on display, the already iconic light scheme, magnificent blocking, and attention to detail. The performances by Justice Smith and Jack Haven are among the best I've ever watched, and the way in which they interact with the setting continues to plague me. I feel like this film had its time in the light, but it's almost forgotten about now. It's strange to me how it's not higher in people's lists at the end of the year. Number 3. Flow. I think it's a little sacrilegious to start this by talking about my love of animals because it's disrespectful to the actual quality of the film and how much the film itself goes beyond that. I'm gonna do it anyway though, cause I just love animals so very much. Also, it's not like I haven't talked at length about what this film has to offer. As someone who grew up with many pets around during my life, I've always had an attachment to discovering how they work psychologically, and I think the world's scientists have a point when they say the more we research animals, the smarter they become. This film does justice to the intelligence of animals, and while, of course, no group of animals can steer a boat such as this, but the interactions between them feel so incredibly well thought out and realistic. This feels like a film I could probably watch 100 times without getting bored. It's one I can show anyone and everyone. It has that kind of universality that brings people together. Films like that are incredibly rare, but they have the added bonus of attaching themselves to the good memories of watching with my friends and family. Number 2. Queer. I feel like it's easy to forget that Queer is a mid-budget film because its source material is so much closer to indie film sensibilities. That budget though allows it to be many aspects of cinema I love all at the same time. Its story is certainly progressive. I wouldn't say I haven't seen a gay relationship developed with such explicitity before, but still, in the current climate, making a story like this is a statement in itself, one that I treat with reverence. The film so thoroughly takes advantage of its budget though, with possibly some of the best production design I've ever seen, and performances to match the technical merit around it. It's not one of those films where you wonder where all the money went. The ceiling to all of Guadagnino's ideas was heightened because he had the resources to pull it off. It had one of the all-time great scores as well. It's one that'll probably stick with me forever. It's hard to say more about this movie. I mean, it has the most nominations of the year for a reason. It has the most wins of this year for a reason. It's more than a worthy film. Number 1. Challengers. You know, it's funny, I didn't come into this year as a super fan of Luca Guadagnino. Of course I thought he was great, I enjoyed Call Me By Your Name quite a bit, but I actually haven't seen Bones and All or Suspiria. I think A Bigger Splash is incredibly underrated though. This movie had a case of being in the right place at the right time, and I felt uniquely excited to watch it. First of all, I'm a huge tennis fan. My cousins growing up were serious tennis players, and so being with them I tangentially grew a love for it. I know Guadagnino wasn't entirely interested in the specifics, but because I've seen the power of what the sport can be, I had a natural disposition to what the film was going for. It also came out a month or two after I had just moved to Korea to teach English, and I was feeling seriously homesick that day, wondering what I was doing there, what my path was. It was playing at the CGV art house Park Chan-wook Theater, pretty much the only major indie theater in Seoul that played films in English from time to time. I was starved of a good movie, because for whatever reason I thought more of the Korean films would have options for English subtitles. Stupid American. The only English films playing in Korea were whatever studio slop was playing, like Despicable Me 4 or Beetlejuice. Yeah, anyway, I was homesick, starved of a good movie, and this one hit me like a ton of bricks. I was floored by the technical direction, by the screenplay, by the performances, by the score. Oh my god, the score was amazing. I would have loved the film without the circumstances, but with them it reminds me of a specific time in my life. I love this film, and like Flow, its rewatchability is endless. It also made me look back at my life and wonder if I'm gay, actually, and to what degree. I think any film that makes you question your sexuality is doing its job properly. So there you have it, my top 25 films of 2024. I probably should have gone with 24 since it's 2024. Maybe I'll do that the next couple of years. I'll make the list higher each year. I want to thank again each and every one of you guys that took the time to watch this video. I know it's coming out far later than I would have wanted, but I've never done a project like this, so every bit of it is a learning experience. There's so many great films that I missed that are worth talking about, so please, if I didn't mention something you loved, I would love to hear about it. I'm really excited about the upcoming year. This channel is here to stay, and there's so many exciting projects I have in store. I know this isn't considered one of the best years in film, but it's one that I think is interesting for seeing what the future filmmakers have to offer. Anyway, I've noticed a theme coming out of the messaging, two themes actually: sexual liberation and the coming wave of fascism. We have films like The Brutalist, The Apprentice, and Anora dissecting the natural cruelty of the American dream, Dune Part 2 and I'm Still Here warning about the dangers of a totalitarian state. Hell, even Flow centers around how to grip with the world falling apart around you. On the flip side, you have films like Queer and Baby Girl talking about the complicated nature of reaching sexual freedom. I Saw the TV Glow goes into that same issue as well. Even Nosferatu is about the weight of culture's puritanical mindset. This is to say, it seems like there's a clear message that art is sending to you, one that I implore you to heed. It's absolutely crucial to understand this. You can't come out of film this year without this mindset. Please, I'm begging you. Through the countless films I've seen this year, the message is this: you have to be gay before it's too late. The world is going to end.